Chapter 366. Wuxia did not attend the meeting in Songao Immortal Abode. Those who went to Songao Immortal Abode to have a meeting with Patriarch Jiangyun and Qing Xian were the emperors of 6 dynasties, and their important ministers. They discussed for 3 days and 3 nights, and when Yen Dan and his company returned to Ji City, Wuxia gave them a glance from afar in Duke Yen Li's mansion. Yen Dan's expression was solemn, yet there was a hint of happiness in it. Obviously, the result of the discussion was not bad. On the same night, Ma Yi personally came to Duke Yen Li's mansion and summoned Wuxia into the palace to meet Yen Dan. Led by Ma Yi, Wuxia passed through layers of palaces and finally came to the thatched cottage where he and Lu Qingfeng first came to Ji City, where Yu Xian tested Lu Qingfeng's bloodline and decided to let Lu Qingfeng inherit the title of Duke Yen Lu. When he took off his shoes and entered the cottage, Wuxia saw Yen Dan sitting cross-legged on a straw hassock, and Princess Zhongli was sitting right next to him with her head hung low. Princess Zhongli's eyes were a little red. Obviously, she had just been crying. Wuxia gave Princess Zhongli a look, then bowed to Yen Dan according to the etiquette of an emperor and a minister. After that, he sat down on the hassock right next to Yen Dan, facing Princess Zhongli. Hearing Wuqi's movement, Princess Zhongli raised her head up and twitched her lips at Wuxia, indicating that she had smiled. Wuxia looked at Princess Zhongli worriedly. He felt that in just 2 to 3 days, she seemed to have grown up a lot. Princess Zhongli, who used to be naive and a little stubborn, seemed to have grown up overnight when he saw her today, becoming mature and sensible. She still had the childishness of a young girl, but her eyes were no longer flowing with indefinite light. Instead, they had become much more resolute and strong. After taking a look at Princess Zhongli, Wuxia nodded slightly at Yen Dan and said, "Your Majesty, what's the matter for summoning me so late at night?" Yen Dan nodded and waved his hand. Ma Yi silently walked out and stood guard in front of the grass hut. Wuxia gave the surroundings a glance with his divine will. 2,000 feet away, the sinecures and palace guards of Great Yen Dynasty had formed an impenetrable defense. Powerful defensive formations had sealed off the sky and ground, making it so that not even a fly could sneak in. Giving Wuxia a look, Yen Dan said in a deep voice, "Mod and Sun Kuang, 2 old misters, have successfully transcended their thunder tribulations and become heaven immortals a few months ago." Wuxia nodded and said, "Yes. If not for the help of these 2 old misters, I'm afraid father-in-law would not have been able to return from Shuiyuan planet this time." Yen Dan narrowed his eyes. Lightly tapping his finger on the floor next to him, he said coolly, "Each of the 6 dynasties has 2 to 3 imperial advisors and sinecures. After cultivating the Energy Unity Technique and Tranquil Heart Sutra, and receiving the advice and guidance from the immortals from the 2 great immortal sects, they have successfully broken through the barrier in their cultivation base and transcended their thunder tribulations." After pondering for a while, Yen Dan told Wuxia the result of the meeting in Songao Immortal Abode. All 6 dynasties had people who had become heaven immortals, and in total there were tens of them. The overall strength of the 6 dynasties was no weaker than White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect. Patriarch Jiangyun and Patriarch Qing Xian were the kind of men of virtue who only focused on cultivating in peace, and were not fond of fighting. After 3 days and 3 nights of negotiation, the emperors of the 6 dynasties were still the outer sect disciples of the 2 great immortal sects, maintaining a relationship with the 2 patriarchs. However, the 2 great immortal sects would no longer restrict the people of the 6 dynasties, and would allow them to do whatever they wanted. To some extent, the 6 dynasties and the 2 great immortal sects had formed an alliance. The 2 great immortal sects would not attack the people of the 6 dynasties, and the people of the 6 dynasties would not take the initiative to plot against the 2 great immortal sections. If any one of them was in danger, both sides would do their best to help. This alliance was only aimed at the 6 dynasties as a whole, and if there was an internal strife among the 6 dynasties, the 2 great immortal sects would not interfere. In just 3 years, the overall strength of the 6 dynasties had suddenly risen to a level where they could be mentioned in the same breath as the 2 great immortal sections. Therefore, the distribution of resources on Myriad Immortals' planet had to be reconsidered. The 2 great immortal sects would have 40% of the resources of Myriad Immortals' planet, while the 6 dynasties would each have 10%. Yan Dan said coolly. Initially, with Ing Zheng's temper, he would collude with the 6 dynasties and completely wipe out the 2 great immortal sections. But putting aside how many of us would die in the process, according to Patriarch Jiang Yun, they are not itinerant cultivators without any background, but immortals who also have the backing of some great sect. The 2 great immortal sects are just the outer branches of their respective sects stationed in Liyuan Galaxy. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. He nodded and said, "So that's why they formed such an alliance." Yan Dan wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead and said with a cold grin, "I can tell that Jiang Yun, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi are not greedy people. They have been focusing on cultivating in seclusion, and they do not have any evil intentions. Otherwise, judging from the fact that they still have the backing of the sects behind them, they still have the ability to kill us even if they did not kill us 3 years ago." Yan Dan sneered mockingly and said, "That Ing Zheng has forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. Humph, if he wants to scheme against these immortals, he will have to see if we can swallow them. What's even more ridiculous is that just like us, their lives are still in the hands of others, and yet they are already restless." Wu Qi raised his head abruptly, a bright gleam flashing in his eyes. What did Yan Dan mean when he said their lives were still in the hands of others? Shaking his head, Yan Dan sighed and said, "Now that we have formed this alliance with the 2 great immortal sects, we will be safe and sound in the future. Besides, with the help of the 2 great immortal sects, especially the power of the sects behind them, we might be able to achieve something else." Pointing at Princess Zhonglu, Yan Dan said in a deep voice, "Just now I told Zixian about her mother. After Zixian was born, I used an energy-seizing pill to seize all the blood essence of her mother. That is why Zixian lost her mother when she was born. She knows about this." Wu Qi's throat was stuck, and he asked in a deep voice, "Did His Majesty personally give the order?" Yan Dan nodded his head. He sneered and slapped on the top of his head. A faint ghost howl rang out, and a plume of dark smoke rushed out from the top of Yan Dan's head. Amidst the dark smoke was a nascent divinity that stood 3 feet and 6 inches tall, and it was obvious that it had attained some level of maturity. Judging from the appearance of the nascent divinity, it was the nascent divinity cultivated by Yan Dan. However, the nascent divinity of any cultivator was never as mysterious as Yan Dan's. The body of the 3 feet and 6 inches tall nascent divinity was densely covered with countless pitch-black fine threads. Each of these fine threads protruded out from the inside of the nascent divinity. It was obvious that these fine threads had deeply fused with Yan Dan's nascent divinity. Wherever these fine threads intersected with each other, there were tiny black specks the size of sesame seeds. Amidst these flickering black specks, there were also countless tiny bone spikes the size of cow's hair that pierced deep into Yan Dan's nascent divinity. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. It seemed this restrictive spell was mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing, but it was not mentioned in detail. However, the Scroll of Stealing did not mention anything about it. Obviously, the shadowy figure who inherited the Scroll of Stealing did not learn the technique related to the restriction of souls in those years. Grinning coldly, Yan Dan said, 3 days ago, the words spoken by Yu Qianqian had let me know her background. Yan Dan stared blankly at Wu Qi for a while. Then he smiled and said, "Do you know that I, Jing Ke Gao Jianli, even MOD, Sun Kuang, and many others have all died once? Before we died, we actually did not know anything about the Tao of cultivation. We were just ordinary mortals, fighting and killing on an ordinary continent." Pointing his right hand at the outside of the cottage, Yan Dan smiled and said, "Ing Zheng Chu Ping Wei Wuji Tian Wan Zhao Sheng and many others, all of them are the same. In those years, the 6 dynasties were fighting and killing each other, and the grudges between us were intertwined. As a result, when we met here, we immediately fought each other to the death." Laughing loudly, Yan Dan told Wu Qi about what happened to them. His laughter was very hearty, but in the middle of the night, it was filled with an eerie and ghostly air. Just as Wu Qi had expected, the heroes of 6 dynasties were noticed by some almighty expert before they died. Then after they died, the almighty expert collected their souls and let them witness the various scenes after they died. After that, The almighty expert promised them that he would teach them the Tao of cultivation that would allow them to live forever, allowing them to become immortals. How many people under the heaven could bear such a great temptation? Therefore, the unknown almighty expert collected the souls of the heroes of the 6 dynasties at the end of the Warring States period, and brought them to Myriad Immortals' planet. Using his mighty magical power, he rebuilt their fleshly bodies and injected their souls into their new bodies, then asked them to cultivate according to the cultivation technique he obtained. Very soon, Yen Dan discovered that their souls were left with an extremely powerful restrictive spell. What was even more frightening was that this soul restrictive spell would be passed down to their next generation. Yen Qijuan, Yen Yushuan, and even Lu Chengfeng had the same restrictive spell in their souls as Yen Dan's nascent divinity. Wu Qi's body tensed up as he asked in a deep voice, "Brother Chengfeng, is it the same for him?" Yen Dan said coolly, "The imperial clan of Great Yen has a huge population. I've tried all kinds of methods, and all the generations of my descendants are trying their best to reproduce, but there is no exception. Apart from Zixian, no one succeeded. Only when Zixian possessed all the blood essence and bloodline of her mother did the restrictive spell break. Therefore, Zixian is the only member of Great Yan's imperial clan who is not controlled by this restrictive spell." Sighing lightly, Yen Dan continued in a soft voice, "Not only Great Yan, but all the members of the imperial clan of the other 6 dynasties, including all the ministers, generals, and their descendants who came to Myriad Immortals' planet together with them. No matter how many techniques they used, no matter how many generations of descendants they had, as far as I know, apart from Zixian, none of the members of the imperial clan of the other 6 dynasties were spared." Wu Qi swallowed a lump in his throat and said with a wry smile, "What is that man trying to do?" Yen Dan said coolly, "That man only left us a sentence in those years. We can do whatever we want, but in the future, when he needs anything from us, we must do our best to help him once." With a self-deprecating smile, Yen Dan said in a deep voice, "Perhaps it has been over 2,000 years, and our overall strength is not enough to catch his attention. That's why he has never contacted us." Wu Qi grinned coldly and said in a cold voice, "Are you sure? What does Yu Clan do?" Yen Dan's face fell instantly. Chapter 367. Yu Clan. Yen Dan grinned coldly and nodded his head thoughtfully. "Yu Clan." Yen Dan pondered for a long while, then nodded his head and said, "Since the founding of Great Yen, there have always been people stirring up rebellions in the imperial court, creating all kinds of conflicts and disputes. I've killed quite a few powerful clans before. But this time, with the incident of Yu Clan, I'm sure that someone has been stirring up trouble behind the scenes." After pondering for a while, Wu Qi asked coolly, "Are they related to that almighty expert?" Yen Dan frowned, clapped his hands and said, "Excellent. Yes, they are related to that man." Wu Qi stared into Yen Dan's eyes and said in a deep voice, "With the overall strength of that almighty expert, if he wants to wipe out Great Yen." Without hesitation, Yen Dan said, "That man's divine abilities and magical power are simply immeasurable. If he wants to wipe out all 6 dynasties, he can do it with just a flip of his palm. In order to frighten us, before he brought our souls to Myriad Immortals' planet, he once showed us a technique. With just an ordinary palm thunder, he has turned several dozens of planets of the same size as Myriad Immortals' planet into nothingness." Wu Qi smiled and said, "So although Yu Clan is related to that man, they are not here to really wipe out Great Yen. Perhaps, Great Yen was just a whetstone, allowing their people to come to Great Yen to train themselves. Therefore, even though we've slaughtered all the members of Yu Clan, and even killed Yu Heling and Yu Hatian who suddenly appeared, we don't have to worry too much." Yen Dan closed his eyes and pondered for a long while, then nodded his head slowly and said, "When I first met that man, I felt that his speech and behavior were rather old-fashioned, but there was also something strange about him. It seemed that he did not know much about the ways of the world. Old-fashioned, yes, old-fashioned, extremely old-fashioned, and he did not know how to be flexible, only knowing how to use force to suppress others." Wu Qi said in a low voice, "You lack strategy and experience." Yen Dan laughed. "Yes, he lacks strategy and experience. Based on Dan's experience, He should have been born into a noble family and received an excellent education. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such earth-shattering power. However, the environment he was in was rigid and old-fashioned, 10,000 times more old-fashioned than old teacher Sun. Compared to the people of the 6 countries, he lacks a kind of human vitality. Yes, he lacks vitality. He's practically a puppet refined by the Mo sect. Wuqi nodded and said, "Therefore the people of Yu clan came to Great Yin. Most likely, there were more people who came from the same background as Yu clan who had come to Great Yin. In fact, there were many such people in other countries as well. Regardless of whether they won or lost, they learned a lot from scheming in the imperial court of the 6 states." Yin Dan slapped the floor excitedly. He retracted his nascent divinity, which was shrouded in dark smoke and was tightly imprisoned, and asked in a deep voice, "The question is, what is his intention?" Then Yin Dan and Wuqi said at the same time, "Talents. He needs a great number of people who are sophisticated and proficient in strategy." Wuqi added, "If the place he was born in is really that rigid and dull, then apart from possessing a cultivation base that can shake the heaven and earth, it is highly possible that apart from that, he will not be able to do anything else. Not only does he need people who are proficient in strategy, but he also needs a manager who knows how to run a business, a general who can lead an army to war, an assassin who is good at scheming and plotting, and..." Yin Dan nodded and said, "All kinds of talents." Yin Dan gave Wuqi a praising look, then patted Wuqi's shoulder and said with a smile, "You've enlightened me. For over 2,000 years, I've been pondering what he wants. But now that I think about it, what he needs are exactly the people we've selected. Even if they are not right, they are not far from it." Both men exchanged a glance, then nodded their heads at the same time. Taking a deep breath, Wuqi said in a deep voice, "His Majesty summoned Wuqi to the palace in the middle of the night. What is it that he wants Wuqi to do?" Yin Dan gave Wuqi a look, then pointed at Princess Zhonglu and said, "Zixian is the only member of Great Yin Imperial Clan who is not imprisoned by that restrictive spell. If something changes in the future, the lives of all the members of Great Yin Imperial Clan will be in the hands of someone else. Take good care of Zixian, protect her, take care of her, and pass on the bloodline of Great Yin Imperial Clan to the next generation. In the future, when you and Zixian have children, pass half of the boys to Great Yin." Yin Dan sighed lightly and said, "My surname is Ji, but I feel that I've let my ancestors down. Therefore, I've been using the name of the dynasty as my surname. Zixian's real name should be Ji Zixian. In the future, half of the boys of your children should have the surname Ji." Wuqi gave Princess Zhonglu a look, then nodded lightly and said, "Of course. If all of you are dead, half of my and Zixian's sons will be passed on to Great Yin, and they will inherit the surname of Great Yin. If Great Yin is destroyed, they will rebuild Great Yin in the future." After listening to Wuqi's words, Yin Dan breathed out a long sigh of relief and said in a deep voice, "That's good. As long as the bloodline of Great Yin doesn't go extinct, that's good enough." Yin Dan sighed lightly, turned to look at Princess Zhonglu, and said softly, "Zixian, the reason why I told you so many things just now is to let you understand that the death of your mother is for the sake of Great Yin, and we have no other choice. If not because of the blood essence and bloodline of your birth mother, which had dissolved the restrictive spell on your soul, you would be in the same situation as me and your father, with your life and death being controlled by someone." Princess Zhonglu gave Wuqi a look, and Wuqi nodded his head lightly. Only then did Princess Zhonglu bow 3 times to Yin Dan, but she did not say a word. Yin Dan smiled bitterly and helplessly. He took a deep breath, threw his head back, breathed out a long sigh, and said, "Well, this is the end of the matter. Wuqi, you already know our background, the cause and effect of the 6 dynasties. We have also roughly understood the background of Yu clan, and what the person behind them wants to do. But all these are just to let you know that we are being controlled by someone, and to remind you to be careful. The reason I called you here today is to ask you to protect Zixian, and the other is..." Yin Dan turned to look at Wuqi. Vaguely, there was a look of anticipation in his eyes. Wuqi was not stupid. After fusing with the soul of Lu Xiaobai, his intelligence had reached the level of a monstrous genius. Later on, he ate the heavenly wit fruit, which made his intelligence even more monstrous. Just by exchanging a glance with Yen Dan, Wuqi immediately understood what Yen Dan was trying to say. He nodded, raised a finger and said, "If your majesty can guarantee the safety of Wuqi's people and belongings in Great Yen, then I, Wuqi, will grant your majesty's request." Yen Dan looked at Wuqi with surprise, smiled and said, "You know what I want to say?" Wuqi nodded and said, "Roughly. The present 6 dynasties are no longer what they used to be. With the existence of heaven immortals, the 6 dynasties will no longer be restricted by the 2 immortal sections. Since the 6 dynasties have begun to infiltrate the outside world, we can foresee that in the future, they will try their best to develop their own forces and territories. Even heaven immortals are rare in Liyuan Galaxy. Once the 6 dynasties launch an all-out attack, the entire Liyuan Galaxy, or even the entire minor heavenly circle realm, will fall into the hands of the 6 dynasties in less than a few hundred years." Upon hearing Wuqi's words, Yen Dan nodded his head and said, "You are right, you are right. The future is just like what you said." Wuqi sighed lightly and said, "The power of the 6 dynasties is growing stronger and stronger. That unknown big shot would definitely pay more attention to the 6 nations. Just like a pig in a barn, the owner will not pay attention to a skinny and small piglet. When the piglet grows into a fat pig that weighs several hundred kilograms, the owner will consider if it is time to kill it and eat it." Yen Dan narrowed his eyes and nodded. He waved his hand and said, "Go on." Wuqi remained silent for a while. After organizing his words, he continued, "According to His Majesty, the emperors, generals, and ministers of the 6 dynasties, as well as all the members of the imperial clan, are controlled by that expert. On top of that, there are people like you clan among the 6 dynasties. Therefore, every move of the 6 dynasties cannot be hidden from that expert." "How can it be hidden from him?" Yen Dan breathed out a long sigh. "As for His Majesty, General Jing Ku, Senior MOD, old Mr. Sun Kuang," Wuqi said coolly, "how can His Majesty General Jing Ku, Senior MOD, old Mr. Sun Kuang? Taking Zheng, Chu Ping, Xiang Yu and many others for example. Which one of them was not a famous hero under the heaven? How can they allow themselves to be played by someone like a little bug?" Wuqi took a deep breath and said hastily, "I'm afraid His Majesty wants Wuqi to find a way to remove the restrictive spell on his nascent divinity, right?" Yen Dan gazed deeply into Wuqi's eyes, nodded his head slowly and said, "Yes, I want you to find a way to remove the restrictive spell on your nascent divinity. I don't care what happens to the other 5 dynasties. But in Great Yin Dynasty, you are the best candidate. Your temperament, character, and overall strength are excellent. Not only that, you are in love with the only princess of Great Yin Dynasty who is not affected by the restrictive spell, and your elder brother, Chengfen, is also a member of Great Yin Dynasty's imperial clan. Don't worry, Dan." With a bitter smile on his face, Wuqi said, "On top of that, I have to do my best. Not only for my elder brother, but also for Zixian, for my father-in-law, for the crown prince of Great Yen, and for you." Suddenly, Yen Dan burst into a loud laughter. He nodded his head and said, "You're right, you're right. You're the best candidate, because you're the son-in-law of Great Yen. Therefore, I'm not afraid that you'll use the method to remove the restrictive spell on your nascent divinity to threaten Great Yen. I'm sure Zheng and others will send someone to do the same thing. But who can they send? Ha ha ha, who can they send?" With a bitter smile on his face, Wuqi pondered for a while and realized that Zheng and others did not have any suitable candidates to send. Should they send someone from their own imperial clan? Since the restrictive spell was placed there, it was highly possible that the person they sent would alert that almighty expert. Should they send someone unrelated to them? Could they trust those people? Would they dare to use them? Laughing, Wuqi rose to his feet and bowed a few times respectfully to Yen Dan. With a deep voice he said, "I, Wuqi, have promised to carry out this task. But I hope your majesty can take good care of my elder brother Chengfen, and those people around Wuqi." Waving his hand, Yen Dan said in an imposing manner, "Don't worry, I'll guarantee them a high official position, a generous salary, and a great wealth. It's just a matter of a word." Before Wuqi could say anything, Dan had already pulled out a token of 9 swallows and thrown it over to Wuqi. What other requests do you have? What do you need? Great Yin Dynasty will help you with all the resources it has. Cut the crap. You should think of a suitable way to discuss this with the Patriarch of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Find a suitable excuse and then. Dan raised his head and looked at the roof of the cottage, then said in a low voice, "The universe is vast, and that man might not necessarily be the strongest expert under the heaven. In this world, there will always be someone who can remove the restrictive spell on his nascent divinity. As long as Great Yin can break free from the restrictive spell, Wuqi, you will be the greatest meritorious minister of Great Yin." Wuqi took over the token of 9 swallows, pulled Princess Zhonglu up, and walked out of the cottage without saying a word. After taking a few steps, he suddenly heard Dan laugh and say, Mai, pass down my decree. I don't want to continue feigning civility with Lao Ai and those people. Purge the palace. Purge it completely. Investigate all the imperial eunuchs and female officials. Those who have been reborn and are not virgins will be executed. Mai answered, while Wuqi turned his head abruptly. Purge the palace? It looked like in order to let Wuqi handle the matter with a peace of mind, Dan was going to start dealing with those people who did not get along with Wuqi. That was good. Chapter 368. It had been half a year since the fall of Yu Academy. The 6 dynasties and the 2 immortal sects lived in peace. The forces of the 6 dynasties had begun to expand outward, quietly encroaching on the planets inhabited by cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy, according to the agreed areas. Those planets that were overseen by immortal sects, and had cave abodes built by heaven immortals, were still in a peaceful state. However, those planets with weak overall strength like Dark Radiance Planet and Shuiyuan Planet were suddenly plunged into a great turmoil. Every day, cultivators were killed, and cultivator clans were massacred. Every day, there were internal conflicts between cultivator clans, and every day, inexplicable conflicts broke out between cultivator clans. All of a sudden, Liyuan Galaxy was plunged into a complete mess, and the situation was completely out of control. 2 months ago, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect had quietly made their move. Quietly, they had annexed the planets controlled by Iron Ghost Soul Seizing Sect and Spirit Flame Sect, and announced to the entire Liyuan Galaxy that both immortal sects had gained 2 new elders of Heaven Immortal Realm. After all this was done, both immortal sects ceased all activities once again, and all their elders of Heaven Immortal Realm went into secluded cultivation on Myriad Immortals planet. Perhaps because of the cultivation techniques they practiced, no matter it was the immortals or cultivators from both secluded cultivation, they would never venture out into the outside world when they could. They were the kind of people who would never sit if they could lie down, never stand if they could sit, and never walk if they could stand. They were the orthodox cultivators of morality, who wholeheartedly studied the heavenly Tao. It was because of this traditional style of the 2 immortal sects that the 6 dynasties and the 2 immortal sects could coexist peacefully. One day, Wuqi was squatting in the drill ground of Gutai Dynasty's imperial city, gesticulating and teaching Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan the skill of sword controlling and assassination. Relying on an upper-grade flying sword in her hand, Zi Qianyan had unleashed a 10-feet-long white beam, suppressing Li Yifeng's sword beam, which was neither gray nor white but of lower grade, and making Li Yifeng's back soaked with sweat. There were a few times when he almost raised his hands and surrendered. Clang! A loud noise rang out as Zi Qianyan's flying sword smashed onto Li Yifeng's sword beam. The sword beam was knocked away, and its gleam dimmed as it fell to the ground. Li Yifeng spat out a mouthful of water, his knees buckling as he fell to the ground. Outside the military field, a group of eunuchs and maids rushed over, hurrying to Li Yifeng's side to please him. Li Yifeng gave a loud cry and gave the eunuchs a series of slaps, forcing them to flee far away. After that, he bowed feebly at Wuqi and said, Master, please take pity on your disciple. How about giving your disciple a high-grade flying sword? Just one. Wuqi clapped his palms, rose to his feet lazily and teased. Why don't I give you a flying sword of lower-tier magical treasure level? Then if he wanted the flying sword he wouldn't want the throne. I'll give you a good flying sword, and I'll make your wife the empress of Gutai dynasty, and you'll be her concubine. Zi Qianyan giggled, winked at Li Yifeng and said, My beloved concubine. Li Yifeng shuddered abruptly. Waving his hand hastily, he said, Forget it, I'll just use this flying sword. Laughing bitterly, Li Yifeng came next to Wuqi with a pitiful look on his face and murmured in a low voice, Honorable master, the Gutai dynasty has been pacified. The commanders of all the armies have been replaced by my father's trusted subordinates, and all the officials have been replaced by my own men. Next month, I'll be preparing for the coronation ceremony. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then shook his head. Then he pulled out a pile of immortal talismans, spirit pills, energy stones, flying swords, defensive outfits, and many other things, shoving them to Li Yifeng. I'm not interested in the coronation ceremony. Take these things as a congratulatory gift. As for these 2 low-grade flying swords, I've asked a senior to craft them for you. Treat them well. Li Yifeng was overjoyed when he heard that. Without hesitation, he grabbed all the things. Wu Qi gave Li Yifeng a ferocious glare and said, You and your wife have to treat these flying swords of low-grade magical treasure well. My sword of greedy wolf was only a low-grade magical treasure in the past. Low-grade magical treasures. You must pay attention to the principle of not showing off your wealth. Although White Cloud Planet is the territory of our sect, I can't guarantee that someone will not rob you of your magical treasures. You must be careful. Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan kept nodding their heads and expressing their agreement, then respectfully bowed and thanked Wu Qi. Just as Wu Qi was about to give them a few words of advice, a sword beam suddenly fell from the sky. An executing disciple, who was in charge of guarding the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation of White Cloud Planet, ran over in a flurry and said, Grandmaster, quick! An immortal has come to visit, saying that he is an old friend of Patriarch. Now the only person who can make decisions in the sect is you, Grandmaster. Grandmaster, please go and welcome him at once. Wu Qi was taken aback. Hastily, he gave some instructions to Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan, then transformed into a beam of dark light and soared into the sky. Over the past few days, everyone in White Cloud Immortal Sect had been extremely busy. Apart from Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other elders who had cultivated to the realm of Heaven Immortal, who were staying in seclusion on Myriad Immortal's planet, all the disciples had been dispatched to subdue the planet, Great Flame Planet, which was originally controlled by Spirit Flame Sect. The planet was at least 5 times the size of White Cloud Planet, and it was inhabited by a large number of native mortals. After Spirit Flame Sect was wiped out, in order to control the mortals on the planet and prevent them from triggering any disasters of wars, many cultivators, including Jiang Qingzi, who were stationed on White Cloud Planet, had rushed to Great Flame Planet. Currently, apart from a few nascent divinity cultivators who were in secluded cultivation on White Cloud Peak and Spirit Cloud Peak, Wu Qi, the executing disciple of Discipline Hall, was the one with the highest cultivation base and seniority. Therefore, this executing disciple, who was in charge of the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, came directly to Gutai Dynasty to look for Wu Qi. Bringing a beam of dark light behind him, he flew hastily to the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, which served as the outer gate of White Cloud Immortal Sect. Wu Qi gave it a glance with his eyes, and saw an old man standing next to the formation. He was clad in a yellow linen shirt made from hemp, a pair of straw sandals on his feet, and holding a green wooden staff in his hand. His head was bald, and only a tuft of long hair was left behind his ears, fluttering in the wind. He was standing on top of a mountain rock, looking at the surrounding scenery with great interest. The old man had a tall stature, and his back was slightly hunched. He had a kind countenance, and the aura emanating from him was righteous but not evil. Clear air could be seen rippling around him, wheeling vaguely and taking the shape of a white crane. He truly looked like an immortal, elegant, and otherworldly, which made him look like an immortal. Quietly, Wu Qi landed next to the old man, cupped his fist and said, Senior Immortal, Wu Qi, executing disciple of White Cloud Immortal Sect's Discipline Hall, offers greetings. The old man spun and gave Wu Qi a quick glance, then cried out in surprise, Little guy, how old are you now? Are you 1,000 years old? Wu Qi shook his head hastily. What a joke. 1,000 years old? He was only in his early 20s this year. The old man cried out in surprise, then rushed up to Wuqi and stood less than 3 inches away from him. He gave him a thorough look, then said hesitantly, "Could it be that you're only 600 years old this year? That's really young. TSK, you're indeed young and tender." Wuqi shook his head again. 600 years old? How could he be that old? The old man gave a loud cry and took 2 steps back. Staring at Wuqi, he cried out, "What? You're not even 600 years old." A peak stage nascent soul cultivator, who's not even 600 years old? What kind of spirit pills have you taken? You must be at least 300 years old. Wuqi shook his head with a hollow smile. 300 years old? What a long distance it still had to travel. The old man took a deep breath, stared at Wuqi, laughed dryly and said, 100 years old. You must be at least 100 years old. Ah. When I formed my nascent soul at the age of 100 years old, I was already considered one of the top geniuses in the sect. You can't be less than 100 years old, can you? Wuqi cupped his fist deeply, laughed dryly and said, "Dear Master Immortal Wuqi, ahaha, I'm 22 years old this year." The old man was struck dumb. Blinking his eyes, he quickly circled around Wuqi. He cried out in shock, 22 years old. A 22 years old peak stage nascent soul cultivator. And you're cultivating the energy unity mystic technique. If you're cultivating the energy unity mystic technique of inaction, doesn't that mean you'll have a chance to form your nascent divinity? A 22 years old nascent divinity. Doesn't that mean you'll have a chance to become a gold immortal in the future? TSK, a gold immortal? Suddenly the old man stomped his feet and cried out, "Jiang Yun, you unfilial little bastard. Lao Tzu is here. Your master, Immortal Greenstaff, is here. Get your ass out here and receive the guest for Lao Tzu. Damn it, it has only been 100,000 years, and you've become so ostentatious. I can't believe you've learned from those itinerant cultivators. Occupying a mountain, and declaring yourself as the king." A cloud towered up into the sky from White Cloud Peak. After being informed by his disciples, Patriarch Jiang Yun hurriedly broke out from Sangao Immortal Abode, and rushed out from the Grand Universal Teleportation Formation, stepping on a watery cloud and rushing towards Wuqi. From a long distance away, Patriarch Jiang Yun had already cried out, "Master, it is really you. I haven't seen you for 100,000 years. How are you doing? Where's Master's wife? Why haven't I seen her?" Wuqi blinked his eyes quickly. This old man, Immortal Greenstaff, was Patriarch Jiang Yun's master? The energy unity mystic technique of inaction of our sect? In other words, the energy unity mystic technique of White Cloud Immortal sect was just a mediocre scripture in Immortal Greenstaff sect? But this energy unity mystic technique was already a pretty good mystic technique for immortal cultivators. After MOD and Sun Kuang obtained the energy unity mystic technique, it took them 3 years of laborious cultivation to break through the heaven immortal tribulation. Judging from this, the immortal sect Immortal Greenstaff belonged to was not weak at all. Without hesitation, Wuqi cupped his hands under his sleeves and stood aside obediently. Patriarch Jiang Yun sprung over, dropped to his knees excitedly, and gave Immortal Greenstaff 17 to 18 kowtows. With this kowtow, Wuqi and all the other White Cloud Immortal sect disciples on the peak had no choice but to drop to their knees and kowtow to Immortal Greenstaff like Patriarch Jiang Yun. Clanking and clanking filled the air, which made Immortal Greenstaff laugh out loud. He raised the green wooden staff in his hand and knocked on Patriarch Jiang Yun's head, making him cry out in pain. After a long while, Immortal Greenstaff finally helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet. After that, his face turned slightly unsightly as he said resentfully, "This time, your master's wife did not come out with Lao Tzu. She had a fight with someone, and her left arm was chopped off. It took me a great effort to find some spirit herbs to reattach it. You also know that your master's wife is very fond of beauty. Someone hit her face with a starlight ball, making it look like a pockmark. She is now undergoing treatment, so how could she come out and embarrass herself?" Patriarch Jiang Yun was taken aback. He roared furiously, "Who is this demon? How dare he hurt my master's wife? Master, you Immortal Green Staff waved his hand and said with a wry smile. The reason Lao Tzu came here this time is to ask you for help. Ugh, how many disciples do you have now? How many nascent soul cultivators and nascent divinity cultivators do you have? Wu Qi's ears pricked up immediately. Ask for help? It seems those things that I've discussed with Yen Dan can finally be carried out. Chapter 369. On the mountainside of White Cloud Peak, at a place several tens of feet above the ocean of clouds, a platform poked out from the cliff. A few old trees and a large patch of wisteria could be seen growing on the stone platform, a stone table and a few stone blocks. What was even more amazing was that there were 2 springs flowing out from the cliff. The gurgling water circled around the platform, then plunged straight down through a gap in the cliff. The ocean of clouds was rocking, and strong winds were blowing, turning the rushing water into a thin layer of mist. The sunlight shone on the mist, drawing out a few hazy rainbows above the sea of clouds. A few white cranes could be seen flying between the rainbows, and occasionally, their cries would ring through the clouds. Immortal Green Staff stood on the edge of the cliff happily, glancing at the surrounding scenery. He pointed his finger and said smilingly, Jiang Yun, you've done a good job. I bet you've spent a lot of effort to build this foundation, haven't you? It has been less than 100,000 years since you left Yuanhua sect after completing your apprenticeship. Good, very good. Together with a few little Taoists, Patriarch Jiang Yun was busying himself off to the side. White Cloud Immortal Sect's best spirit tea, the best wine, and the best fruits were brought out like a stream of water, piling up on the stone table. Upon hearing Immortal Green Staff's words, Patriarch Jiang Yun smiled and said, If not for Master's great kindness in taking me as his disciple and teaching me a supreme magical technique, how could I be where I am today? Immortal Green Staff shook his head, walked back, and sat down on a stone block. Then he picked up a purple mountain fruit and took 2 bites from it. With a muffled voice he said, Let's not talk about this nonsense. Years ago, you asked someone to send me a letter, telling me that you've laid down your foundation in White Cloud Planet, Liyuan Galaxy. I thought you just opened up a shabby cave abode of your own, and cultivated there. Never did I expect that you've actually occupied such a large piece of land. Sighing, Immortal Green Staff stomped his foot and said, When you were forced out of Yuanhua sect, those. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but when he saw Wu Qi standing respectfully off to the side and staring at him from head to toe, Immortal Green Staff shut his mouth and cleared his throat. Let's talk about something serious. Choose a few dozen elites among your nascent divinity and nascent soul disciples to follow me back. This time, Yuanhua sect had a head-on clash with them, and your masterwife was nearly disfigured because of that. Patriarch Jiang Yun's eyes went wide as he cried out sternly, Master, I wanted to ask you just now, who is so bold as to bully Yuanhua sect? While Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun were explaining to each other, Wu Qi pricked up his ears and listened carefully. He had heard every detail of the entire incident. Wu Qi nodded to himself in delight. His chance had come. Yuanhua sect was one of the top 10 sects in Puyo Heavenly Realm. Different from Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, Puyo Heavenly Realm was divided into 9 grades. Upper grade, upper middle grade, upper lower grade, all the way to lower grade. Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was a lower grade heavenly realm. No matter it was in terms of surface area, natural energy or resources, they were all the lowest grade. On the other hand, Puyo Heavenly Realm was a middle lower grade heavenly realm, and all the conditions were at least 100 times better than Minor Heavenly Circle Realm. Being ranked top 10 in Puyo Heavenly Realm, Yuanhua sect had 33 heaven immortals, and their founding ancestral master, Patriarch Yuanhua, had a cultivation base of peak 28th tier heaven immortal. His overall strength was one of the strongest in Puyo Heavenly Realm. Apart from these 33 heaven immortals, Patriarch Yuanhua also had nearly 400 nascent divinity cultivators, over 3,000 nascent soul cultivators, and many more Golden Dan and Xiantian cultivators. Yuanhua sect's overall strength was at least 100 times stronger than White Cloud Immortal sect. Just a single 28th tier heaven immortal, Patriarch Yuanhua, had the power to overturn the entire White Cloud Immortal sect in an instant. This time, Yuan Hua sect was facing another immortal sect ranked top 10 in Puyo Heavenly Realm, the Huiling sect. Both sides had been fighting and killing each other for nearly 1,000 years. The reason was simple. At the border of Puyo Heavenly Realm, at the border between the territories controlled by Yuan Hua sect and Huiling sect, a planet that contained a large amount of upper-grade energy stones was discovered. The planet was barren, and the environment was harsh. However, the energy stones it contained were of excellent quality, as they contained energy stones of all 5 elements. According to Patriarch Yuan Hua's estimation, once all the energy stones on this planet were extracted, it would allow Yuan Hua sect to have an additional 200 nascent divinity cultivators and several thousand nascent soul cultivators within 1,000 years. The prosperity of an immortal sect depended not only on the number of immortals it had, but also the number and grade of its disciples, especially the number of nascent divinity cultivators, as it directly determined the future development potential of the immortal sect. On average, under normal circumstances, without the protection of immortal pills and spirit items, 1 or 2 out of 50 nascent divinity cultivators could transcend their thunder tribulation and become heaven immortals. With an additional 200 nascent divinity cultivators, it meant that Yuan Hua sect could have an additional 4 heaven immortals in the future. On the other hand, with the addition of several thousand nascent soul cultivators, it was highly possible that the sect would have an additional 100 nascent divinity cultivators before their lifespans ran out. Therefore, both immortal sects had gone to war for the sake of this planet that contained an incredible amount of energy stone veins. Over the past 1,000 years, the 2 immortal sects had been fighting and killing each other. Most of their heaven immortal elders were severely wounded, and their overall strength was greatly reduced. Meanwhile, many of their nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators were killed as well. Over the past 1,000 years, Yuan Hua sect alone had lost 300 nascent soul cultivators, and over 20 nascent divinity cultivators were forced to reincarnate. All the other nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators were wounded as well, and their overall strength was greatly reduced. Seeing that the 2 immortal sects were about to suffer a great loss in the fight for the energy stone veins, the immortal monarch who ruled over Puyo Heavenly Realm stepped forward to mediate the dispute. Finally, they came up with a solution that would not cause any damage to both immortal sects, but could still decide the ownership of this planet. Both immortal sects swore an oath that no heaven immortal cultivators would be allowed to participate in the fight, and that both sides would pick a group of elite nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators to have a life and death duel. These nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators had to come from their respective immortal sections. They did not matter if they were the core disciples of the immortal sects, or the members of the organizations established by the outer sect disciples. In short, as long as they were related to the sect, they could participate in the life and death duel. Shaking his head, Immortal Greenstaff breathed out a long sigh and said, "Currently, all the elite disciples in Yuan Hua sect with excellent aptitudes and overall strength are either killed or severely wounded. No matter how hard the ancestral master thought, he could not come up with any solution. Therefore, he could only seek help from you, the disciples who have just finished their apprenticeship." Twitching his lips, Immortal Greenstaff snorted coldly and said, "Jiang Yun, do you still remember those few fellow disciples who have just finished their apprenticeship with you?" Patriarch Jiang Yun rose to his feet, nodded, and said with a smile, "I remember." Shaking his head, Immortal Greenstaff sighed coldly and said, "All of them are good for nothings. A few of them got into a fight right after they left the sect, and ended up dead. Among the remaining 3, only one of them managed to transcend his thunder tribulation and become a heaven immortal. However, he is just an itinerant cultivator, and he does not even have a single disciple. I've searched for them for a long time, but they are really useless. In the end, I've come to you." Looking at Patriarch Jiang Yun with a hopeful expression, Immortal Greenstaff asked softly, "Do you have any useful disciples now?" Wuxia stuck out his chest abruptly and said in a deep voice, "Ancestral Master, I'm willing to serve the sect. Aren't they just a bunch of useless chickens and stray dogs from Huiling sect? With the sword in my hand, I'm willing to kill every single one of them." Immortal Green Staff kept nodding and applauding, then turned to Patriarch Jiang Yun and said with a smile, "This disciple of yours is excellent." Patriarch Jiang Yun smiled and gave Wuxia a glare. After that, he turned to Immortal Green Staff and said, "Master, I now have over 100 nascent divinity cultivators and 1,000 nascent soul cultivators in my sect. 70% of them are my blood descendants. You can use them as you wish, Master." Immortal Green Staff pondered for a brief moment, then nodded and said, "All right. For the duel this time, both sides have agreed to send 10 nascent divinity cultivators and 100 nascent soul cultivators." Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded hastily and said, "With just a word from Master, I can send 10 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators and 100 peak stage nascent soul cultivators to accompany the duel. On top of that, all the magical treasures and flying swords are excellent items. I dare say, without the intervention of a heaven immortal, these disciples of mine are more than enough to deal with enemies who are a few times stronger than us." Patriarch Jiang Yun was very confident. As he had also sworn an oath, he could not reveal the existence of Myriad Immortals' planet to Immortal Green Staff. Over the past few years, relying on the abundant resources on Myriad Immortals' planet, the cultivation base of White Cloud Immortal Sect's disciples had improved at a tremendous pace. More importantly, Myriad Immortals' planet was filled with all kinds of natural treasures. As Patriarch Jiang Yun was an expert in pill concoction, all his core disciples had countless spirit pills in their hands. As a result, their ability to fight a prolonged battle and their ability to defend themselves were many times stronger than ordinary cultivators. The flying swords and magical treasures used by the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect had also been upgraded over the past few years. Each of them now had a few decent defensive magical treasures, all crafted with rare and precious materials found on Myriad Immortals' planet. Therefore, Patriarch Jiang Yun said that his disciples could fight against cultivators who were a few times stronger than them. Immortal Green Staff was very satisfied with Patriarch Jiang Yun's attitude. He kept nodding and praising Patriarch Jiang Yun, then promised, "If we can win this duel, all your disciples will have the chance to join Yuan Hua sect and be taught the true Taoist scripture of unity. Even you, Jiang Yun, were forced to leave the sect in those years. This time, I'll go all out and accept you as my inner sect disciple, no matter how shameless I am." Patriarch Jiang Yun was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees and kowtowed at Immortal Green Staff. Seeing Patriarch Jiang Yun kowtow, Wuqi had no other choice but to follow suit. He smiled bitterly in his mind, thinking that it would be a great trouble if his seniority was too low. It seemed like he would have the potential to become a kowtowing worm in the future. Immortal Green Staff helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet, then began to talk to him about some things that happened in the past. Standing aside, Wuqi could tell that Yuan Hua sect was different from White Cloud Immortal Sect. Because of Patriarch Jiang Yun, White Cloud Immortal Sect had a harmonious internal strife, while Yuan Hua sect had a lot of internal conflicts and factions, and there were many schemes and fights between them. Wuqi nodded silently. It seemed like he would have to be extra careful when he arrived at Yuan Hua sect. While he was pondering, Patriarch Jiang Yun turned to Wuqi and said, "Summon all your senior brothers back at once, and ask them to leave Spirit Flame Sect's territory. Don't worry about them for the time being. Return to the sect now, and prepare to set off with Master." Wuqi quickly cupped his fist and bowed, then transformed into a beam of light and sped away. Chapter 370. Late at night, in Duke Yanli's mansion in Ji City of Great Yan, Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng were lying on a wooden platform in the middle of a small lake in the backyard, quietly looking at the twinkling stars in the sky. Both of them were holding wine jars in their hands, gulping down mouthfuls of wine. Just now, Wu Qi told Lu Qingfeng about some of the plans he and Yan Dan had, as well as some of the causes and consequences of the situation. Lu Qingfeng's mood was very heavy, and he kept gulping down the wine, exhaling deeply, which reeked of wine. "This is going to be a dangerous journey. You have to be extra careful." After a long while, Lu Qingfeng said with a deep voice, "Don't worry about Great Yan. I'll keep a close watch on your star-picking city. I'll take good care of the #1 martial club under the heaven, as well as Meng Xiaobai and the others. They are also my brothers, there won't be any slip-ups. All right, said Wu Qi in a deep voice. Take care of yourself. Throwing a small and exquisite spirit breeding ring to Lu Chengfeng, Wu Qi said, This is a spirit breeding ring crafted by me. The territory inside it is a little small, about 100 acres in size. I've just recruited 100 longbow men, and each of them has transcended their thunder tribulation and formed the Jin Dan. Once they form the formation, they have the ability to kill nascent soul cultivators. Take it and protect yourself. Lu Chengfeng did not hesitate. He wore the spirit breeding ring on his finger, then pulled out a thread of natural silk from around his neck, and threw it to Wu Qi along with over 30 storage rings. A long thread of natural silk and over 30 glinting storage rings. Wu Qi nearly burst out laughing at the sight. Since when did Lu Chengfeng learn this hobby of his? He sent his divine will into the storage rings, and found that over 30 storage rings, each measuring about 1,000 feet in both width and length, were filled with countless energy stones. There were top-grade, high-grade, middle-grade and low-grade spirit stones. There were 3 storage rings worth of low-grade spirit stones, and the rest were all middle-grade and above spirit stones. Lu Chengfeng said with a smile, I've been working as the mine's manager for the past few years, so there are always some benefits. Take these spirit stones with you. When you go out, you should always bring some good stuff with you. Besides, we're not poor people. How can you not bring more spirit stones when you go out? Wu Qi nodded. With a sweep of his divine will, he transferred all the energy stones in the ring into the black dragon spirit ring. A small black dragon's soul rushed out and swallowed all the storage rings one by one. The storage space within the black dragon spirit ring expanded once again, and the black dragon's soul let out an extremely comfortable dragon roar. He patted the black dragon's soul and stuffed it back into the ring. Wu Qi jumped up and said in a low voice, I'll leave everything in the family to you, big brother. Lu Chengfeng rose to his feet and said, Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Nodding his head, Wu Qi stepped onto a cloud and flew towards the Imperial Palace at top speed. As it was only a few miles away from the Imperial Palace, Wu Qi arrived in the Imperial Palace with a flash of the cloud. Slowly, he landed on the cloud at the entrance of the secret vault. Princess Zhonglu and Ma Yi were already waiting outside the secret vault. When they saw Wu Qi come down, Princess Zhonglu immediately flew to his side and hugged his arm without saying a word. Meanwhile, Ma Yi bowed respectfully to Wu Qi and said in a low voice, His Majesty said that Duke of Tianyan is free to allocate everything in the secret vault. Nodding his head, Wu Qi walked to the entrance of the secret vault, fished out the token of 9 swallows given to him by Yan Dan, and inserted it into the dent right in the middle of the entrance. Streams of light flowed out from the token, spreading and spreading through the thick and heavy entrance of the secret vault. The entrance opened soundlessly, revealing a sealed space about 200 feet in both width and length. 30 sinecures of Great Yan Dynasty were stationed in this place, and underneath it was a short-distance teleportation formation. Pulling Princess Zhonglu, Wu Qi walked into the teleportation formation. A few sinecures activated the formation and changed the coordinates of the teleportation formation. A blinding light flickered, and Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu felt their bodies lightened. The scene before their eyes changed, and in the next moment, they had arrived in front of another entrance. There was no one in this place, and it was a huge cave about 1,000 feet in both width and length. Before them was a dark green door, about 100 feet in height, without any decorative patterns on it. 2 war puppets from Mo sect, each standing 100 feet tall, and having a pair of dull and lifeless eyes, and their bodies forged with metal, were standing in front of the door. Scorching airwaves that could make one suffocate were emanating from their bodies. Without any hesitation, Wu Qi quickly pulled out the token of 9 swallows and showed it to the 2 puppets. Only then did he pull Princess Zhonglu closer to the door, using his right hand to lightly press a few times on the door. Every time Wu Qi pressed a button, a bright spot would light up on the door. Very soon, the bright spots formed the pattern of the Big Dipper. The 7 stars spun, and the door opened soundlessly, revealing the secret vault of Great Yan Dynasty behind it. This secret vault was built and expanded by Great Yan Dynasty over the last 2,000 years. It consisted of 9 floors, and each floor was about 100 miles in circumference. For the last 2,000 years, all the taxes collected by Great Yin Dynasty and the tributes from the vassal kingdoms were stored in this vault. There was one floor of the secret vault, where a huge amount of food, wine, meat, and other daily necessities were stored. The amount of food stored in this 100 miles in circumference was more than enough for Great Yin Dynasty to deal with the natural and man-made disasters from a few vassal kingdoms at the same time. Apart from the first floor of the secret vault, there was also a second floor of the secret vault that stored salt and herbs. One floor of the secret vault stored gold, and the other floor stored silver. The rest of the secret vault stored various natural treasures that Great Yin Dynasty had plundered over the years, as well as various rare and precious materials that could only be used by cultivators. After entering the secret vault, Wuxia stood directly at the entrance of the secret vault, where all kinds of rare and precious metals were stored. Ripples emerged from his body, as 18 celestial fiend puppets walked out from Wuxia's body while laughing in a deep voice. Their faces looked exactly the same as Wuxia's, and they all had an excited smile on their faces. Wuxia pointed at the secret vault, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Don't save any money for Great Yin Dynasty. Devour as much as you can. Store as much as you can in your body. Try your best to refine them, and make your cultivation base improve as soon as possible. I have 2 nascent souls now, and both of them have the cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. Do your best." The 18 celestial fiend puppets let out excited cries, then dashed into the secret vault while leaving afterimages in their wake. Very soon, noises that sounded like mice gnawing on soybeans could be heard echoing out from the secret vault. Amidst the cracking noises, the rare and precious metals that Great Yin Dynasty had stored for so many years were being consumed at an incredible speed. Paying no attention to the 18 celestial fiend puppets, Wuxia came before the entrance of the secret vault, where demon beasts' inner cores, blood essence, furs, and bones were stored. A white light flickered from the spirit breeding ring, as Gold Horn and Silver Horn rushed out while drooling. Then came Long Yuan and 10,000 longbow men. Pointing his finger at the secret vault, Wuxia said in a deep voice, "Empty them. Swallow whatever you can now. And as for those you can't, choose those that are convenient to store and take them away. We don't know when we can come back, and it will be very difficult for us to collect so many good things when we are away from home." Gold Horn and Silver Horn let out a joyful cry, then led a group of longbow men and rushed into the city like hungry wolves and tigers. Just as Wuxia had said, when they were away from home in the future, it would be nearly impossible for them to collect so many materials. How many materials could Wuxia collect alone, even if he worked as a miner every day? Great Yin Dynasty was an enormous dynasty, and it had over 2,000 years of savings. If Wuxia did not help him spend some, he would feel sorry for the agreement he had reached with Yandan. After that, Wuxia brought Princess Zhonglu and came to the secret vault that stored all kinds of spirit herbs. Wuxia strode into the vault and scanned the surroundings with his divine will. Regardless of the quality, he grabbed all the materials that he knew could be used in the ancient prescription, and sent them into the Black Dragon spirit ring. Hastily, the Black Dragon soul sorted these herbs into different categories, neatly divided them into different storage spaces, and stored them properly. The efficiency of divine will was much faster than manual labor. In just 1 hour, Wuxia had searched through all the spirit herbs stored in this secret vault, taking away 30% of the spirit herbs. Among them, there were several million kilograms of spirit herbs that could be used to concoct the 9th-grade drunken dragon incense. Wuxia had made up his mind that he would make good use of an unorthodox pill like the drunken dragon incense in the future. After he was done with all the spirit herbs, Wuxia entered another level of the vault, where all kinds of strange and rare items were stored. Even an old demon like Xiong Wanling could not identify them. Although these items were very strange, in Wuqi's eyes, their functions were very clear. There were illustrated documents of all kinds of natural treasures in Scroll of Stealing, and as long as they were valuable, nothing could hide from Wuxia. Like a mouse falling into a rice vat, Wuxia had plundered more than half of these strange and rare treasures. Except for some items that he did not really like, he had taken all the rest. After working for a whole day and night, Wuqi finally let out a clear cry. With heavy steps, the 18 celestial fiend puppets returned to Wuqi's side. Without saying a word, they fused back into Wuqi's body. Wuqi could clearly sense that these celestial fiend puppets had eaten too much. Apart from the rare metals that they could digest now, they had also opened up a rather large storage space in their bodies, storing a large amount of rare metals in it. This took up a great deal of their strength, and it made it difficult for them to move around. Led by Long Yuan, the longbow men returned with bags of different sizes. Some of them were bleeding from their noses. In order to quickly improve their cultivation base, these big fellows had devoured some demon cores and other treasures from some powerful demon beasts, and as a result, blood was dripping from their noses. But Gold Horn and Silver Horn were in the most difficult situation. They were carried out by Long Yuan with their eyes rolled up. 2 greedy pythons were coughing out mouthfuls of blood, which was filled with all kinds of strange flames and emanating surging waves of energy. Both brothers had eaten too much. When had they ever seen a storehouse filled with demon cores, blood essence, and other treasures that could greatly replenish one's energy and improve one's cultivation base? They did not care whether their bodies could withstand it, and had devoured several hundred demon cores from nascent soul demon beasts in one go. The consequence was that their bodies nearly exploded, and their internal organs were nearly cooked. However, as both brothers possessed the bloodline of an ancient species, although they were about to die from overeating, their life force was extremely strong, and they were hanging on to their last breath. Wuqi felt relieved after checking their condition, and shoved them back into the spirit breeding ring. One after another, the longbow men walked back into the ring. Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then took away a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, grains, wine, and rice from the secret cave. Only then did he leave the secret vault with Princess Zhanglu contentedly. Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan were waiting outside the secret vault. Chapter 371. The starlight was as cold as ice. Not a single light could be seen in the vast Great Yan Imperial Palace. Only the starlight that was as clear as ice sprinkled down, illuminating the surroundings. Clad in ordinary black robes, Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan stood in front of the secret vault. The night breeze brushed against their clothes, making them look like ghosts, and filled with an indescribable eeriness. Seeing Wuqi and Princess Zhanglu come out, Yan Dan said in a deep voice, "Be careful and prudent during this long journey." Yan Qijuan nodded and said, "This place has become a troublesome place, and it is a good opportunity for us to travel far away. But we can still help you to maintain the peace here on Myriad Immortals' planet. When you are out there, there are countless mighty experts in the world. Remember to be careful and prudent when you swallow your anger." Wuqi nodded slowly. Then he fixed his eyes on Princess Zhanglu and said, "Zixian, especially you. You have to listen to Wuqi in everything." Princess Zhanglu nodded silently, and her eyes turned slightly red. After a brief moment of silence, Wuqi fished out a jade slip from under his sleeve and handed it to Yan Dan. "These are some of Wuqi's men, some connections that can be used, and some temporary life-saving measures. Since we are leaving Myriad Immortals' planet, these arrangements will not be of use for the time being. I'll leave them to your majesty." In the jade slip, Wuqi left behind all the passageways to his life-saving cave abodes, as well as the information about Duke of Longyang, Zhao Kuo, the 3 sinecures of Zhao State, and those who were friends or colluded with him, as well as the information about his 2 disciples from Gutai dynasty. All of them were given to Yan Dan by Wuqi. Wuqi believed that with Yan Dan's experience and knowledge, he would be able to maximize the value of these information. When he sent his divine will into the jade slip and gave it a glance, he was taken aback by what he saw. Staring at Wuqi in astonishment, he cried out, "Little brat, why did you leave behind so many secret caves for escaping? People say that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, but you have more than 3. Laughing dryly, Wuqi pulled Princess Zhongli's little hand and said awkwardly, "I'm afraid of death, that's all." Yan Dan shook his head, pointed his finger at Wuqi, and scolded him with a smile. He gladly memorized all the information in the jade slip, then crushed it with his palm. Without saying anything else, Wuqi pulled Princess Zhonglu and walked out of the imperial palace step by step. Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan followed beside them, their hands clasped behind their back as they walked step by step. Princess Zhonglu pursed her lips and leaned on Wuqi. Although her expression was still firm, her steps were a little weak. After all, she was still young, but due to various reasons, she had to leave her hometown and go to the unfathomable outer realm. Not to mention a little girl like Princess Zhonglu. Even a man would not feel good when he was asked to abandon everything at home and travel to a faraway place. When they came to the entrance of the imperial palace, Yan Dan suddenly said, "Don't worry, just go and do what you need to do. You don't need to interfere in the internal affairs of Great Yan." A few months ago, when the palace was purged, all the disciples of Great Sun sect who were hiding in the palace were killed, and all the spies from Yu Academy were wiped out as well. Great Yan will always stand behind you. No matter what help you need, Great Yan will give it our best. Wuqi frowned and asked, "Since all the disciples of Great Sun sect who were hiding in the imperial palace were killed, where is Lao Ai?" Yan Dan shook his head and said in a deep voice, "I don't think Lao Ai is that easy to deal with." Upon hearing that, Wuqi knew immediately that Lao Ai was hiding somewhere, and that Great Yan dynasty had not done anything to him. Nodding his head, Wuqi sighed and said, "This man is an evildoer. When you have the chance to strike ruthlessly, you must never be soft-hearted. Otherwise, the things he will do will be unbearable." Both Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan had an unsightly expression on their faces. What Wuqi said was exactly what they were thinking. Lao Ai's cultivation base was not that strong, and it was not a big deal for him to use his divine abilities and dermic powers. Even though he was backed by Su Meier, Mod, and Sun Kuang, Su Meier dared not to do anything reckless. But Lao Ai's divine abilities and dermic powers were extremely evil, and the things he did were really unbearable. Once he messed up the imperial palace, even if they could kill him in the end, once his reputation spread out, Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan would not look good. With a wry smile, Yan Qijuan clenched his jaws and said, "Kill Lao Ai with all the strength of the entire dynasty. Release all the things he has done, even if it brings shame to us. I want to make sure that no one under the heaven dares to take him in. With what happened to Yingzheng's mother as an example, I want to see who among the 6 dynasties dares to take him in." Yan Dan laughed bitterly and shook his head. Then he patted on Wuqi's shoulder and said loudly, "Let's go. Go now, and do what you need to do. Great Yan is here, and as long as it does not fall, you will be able to get all the support you need from Great Yan." Wuqi nodded his head heavily. He gave Yan Dan a look and thought of Yan Dan's nascent divinity, which was shrouded in a dark mist and imprisoned by countless bone spikes. Then, he turned to look at Yan Qijuan. Perhaps his nascent soul was in the same state as well. Then he turned to look at Princess Zhonglu, whose face was as beautiful as a blooming flower, but with a pale and unsightly face. His heart felt heavy and uncomfortable. One of the reasons why Wuqi had decided to leave with Immortal Green Staff was to find a reliable almighty expert, and release the shackles on Yan Dan, and the other's nascent divinity. Another reason was that Wuqi was also imprisoned by Lady Dark Goldwater's Dark Een Soul captivation. If he could not find an almighty expert to help him, or if Wuqi could not break through the cultivation base of Gold Immortal in just 1,000 years, his soul would perish and perish 1,000 years later. Wuqi did a quick calculation. If he stayed on Myriad Immortal's planet, the chances of him breaking through the cultivation base of Gold Immortal Realm within 1,000 years was less than 30%. Only by leaving Myriad Immortal's planet and plunging into a wider world could he find a slim chance of success. Wuqi had a strong confidence that he would not die because of the Dark Een Soul captivation. However, he had to struggle with all his might for that slim chance of survival. Only then could he truly escape from the shadow of death. After bidding farewell to Yan Dan and Yan Qijuan, Wuqi brought Princess Zhonglu and stepped onto a white cloud and flew up into the sky. As he flew up into the sky, Wuqi saw Lu Buwei standing on top of a tall building with a courtyard not far away. With his hands clasped behind his back, he was looking at them with a gloomy face. Wuqi just gave Lu Buwei a cold glance, then turned his head away and ignored him. Now Wuqi no longer took Lu Buwei seriously. After killing a few heaven immortals on Shuiyuan planet, Wuqi's vision had become very high. So, what could Lu Buwei do to him? Don't come looking for trouble with me in the future, or I'll wipe out your entire clan. Staring at Lu Buwei, Wuqi transmitted his voice to him in a cold voice. Lu Buwei stared back at Wuqi with an unchanged expression, not showing any fear or hesitation. Wuqi grinned coldly and did not say another word. After returning to Duke Yanli's mansion, Wuqi woke up Catfish Flood Dragon, who was sleeping soundly with her head covered, and Lord Xiansheng, who was sitting cross-legged and regulating his breath. Wuqi did not know what to say to both of them. Lord Xiansheng was a loyal man. When he heard that Wuqi was going to leave for Pilyuo Heavenly Realm, fearing that Wuqi would suffer in the outside world, he simply wanted to follow Wuqi on a journey, saying that he wanted to gain some experience. Lord Xiansheng was a loyal man, as he had abandoned his territory and followed Wuqi on a long journey. Of course, it might also be because Wei Niang Dragon King had asked him to do so. This cunning old man was not a kind man. Most likely, he had taken a fancy to Wuqi's potential, and had wholeheartedly wanted his son to follow Wuqi. Perhaps he would be able to have a better and better development. As for Catfish Flood Dragon, Wuqi had no idea why she wanted to follow him. Just listen to her excuse. If I follow Wuqi and Princess Zhongli, there will be food for me. Is that still a reasonable excuse? Does it mean that I, Wuqi, am the owner of a black inn, who would sneak attack people all day long and throw them to Catfish Flood Dragon to eat? But it's not a bad thing, thought Wuqi to himself. With Catfish Flood Dragon following him, it would be very easy for him to destroy the body after he killed someone. He could just throw the body to her and let her eat it. Even the hair would be melted by her strong digestive ability, and it would save Wuqi the trouble of doing it himself. Gulp. A living person is gone just like that. How convenient is that? Without disturbing Lu Chengfeng, who was sleeping soundly after getting drunk, Wuqi and his company were teleported to Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode through the teleportation formation in the Imperial Palace, and then arrived at White Cloud Planet through the teleportation formation constructed by White Cloud Immortal Sect. At this point in time, Patriarch Jiang Yun had already selected a group of elite disciples. Together with Wuqi, Princess Zhongli, Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon, there were 10 peak stage nascent divinity cultivators and 100 peak stage nascent soul disciples. He left the internal affairs of the sect to ancestral masters Qingxia and Bai Wu, and decided to personally lead the team back to Yuanhua sect with Immortal Green Staff. The trip was a major event that would decide whether Patriarch Jiang Yun could be promoted as an inner-sect disciple of Yuanhua sect, and also his future achievement. Therefore, he dared not to neglect it, and naturally, he had to lead the team himself. When immortal cultivators traveled, they did not have as many complicated problems as mortals. Bringing with them 110 disciples, Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun strode into White Cloud Immortal Sect's Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. After that, Immortal Green Staff fished out over 100 upper-grade energy stones, and inserted them into the formation, then used his divine will to locate a distant destination in the formation. The destination they were heading to was the core of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, the place where the Immortal Monarch's immortal abode was located. Traveling from Minor Heavenly Circle Realm to Pilyuo Heavenly Realm was a teleportation across heavenly realms. The distance was extremely far, and it would take a very long time to arrive at Pilyuo Heavenly Realm with an ordinary Grand Universal Teleportation Formation. Only in the immortal abode of the immortal monarch of each heavenly realm was a public teleportation formation that could teleport someone from one heavenly realm to another in a blink of an eye. The company stood in the teleportation formation. Looking at Qingxia and Bai Wu outside the formation, Patriarch Jiang Yun said in a deep voice, "I'll leave everything in the clan to you, my wives." Qingxia and Bai Wu said together, "Rest assured, my husband. Nothing will go wrong in the clan." All three ancestral masters were very confident that even though Patriarch Jiang Yun had left, White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect still had tens of heaven immortals guarding them. Any power that wanted to take advantage of them would be beaten badly, and there was no need for them to worry about the clan. Immortal Green Staff gave a few loud laughs, then waved his hand and cast out a spirit beam, activating the teleportation formation. A blinding light flashed, and the company disappeared from the teleportation formation. Wuqi felt a tremendous pressure coming at him. Without hesitation, he grabbed Princess Zhonglu and hugged her tightly. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, the company's eyes lit up, and their bodies felt heavy. They had arrived at a strange place. Chapter 372. The person in charge of this place was an immortal monarch from the heaven who possessed the cultivation base of 34th tier heaven immortal, Immortal Li He. Under his command were 2 immortal officials with the cultivation base of 35th tier, 8 heaven immortals with the cultivation base of 36th tier, and the rest of the officials were all in nascent divinity realm. Apart from them, their families and clansmen also lived here, and the total population was less than 30,000. Immortal He opened his mouth and shot out a sword beam, thrusting towards Wuqi's head. As for the density of natural energy here, it was slightly weaker than Myriad Immortals' planet, but it was not a huge difference. Although Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was a lower-tier heavenly realm, it still had a large number of energy veins, and the total amount of natural energy it produced every day was also quite high. More importantly, it was a vast place with a large number of energy veins. But, correspondingly, the population of humans and beasts here was very small. After obtaining Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, Wuqi had gained a deeper understanding of the official positions of the Celestial Court. There were 3 lotus flowers on the white jade medallion, the symbol of a 34th tier immortal official. A 34th tier immortal official, who was responsible for the management of a remote place like Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, was roughly equivalent to a village official on Earth, a deputy official of a poor village at the national level. Perhaps a blink of an eye had passed, or perhaps a few days and nights had passed. In any case, during the high-speed journey, the concept of time had been lost. Immortal Greenstaff was taken aback, then suddenly burst into laughter. You are indeed a wild dog. The total number of energy veins in this vast Minor Heavenly Circle realm was at least 10 times that of Myriad Immortals planet and White Cloud planet combined. However, the population here was very small, and after careful cleansing, apart from the family members of immortal officials and minor officials like Immortal Li He, there was not even a single demon beast in this place. As a result, the natural energy consumption was very low, and after years of accumulation, the total amount of natural energy here was about the same as that of Myriad Immortals planet. Immortal Greenstaff smiled and was about to say something, but all of a sudden, a strong light burst out from another teleportation formation next to him, from which came a group of people. Upon seeing Immortal Greenstaff, Immortal Li He's face was immediately filled with a big smile. Without hesitation, he came to greet them, cupped his fist and said, "Senior Immortal, you are finally back? Smooth journey? Good journey? Are these fellow Taoists yours?" Suddenly seeing a piece of immortal stone here, Wuqi felt an itch in his heart. He wished he could snatch it away. Among the group of people, a middle-aged Taoist who was less than 5 feet tall and as skinny as firewood rolled his eyes, and a faint flame flickered in his eyes. He glanced over and suddenly burst into laughter. "Green Blockhead, is your woman's face fine? TSK, is my Dharma treasure easy to enjoy?" Upon seeing the man who emerged from the teleportation formation, Immortal Greenstaff's expression flickered abruptly as he slammed the wooden staff in his hand onto the ground. The most precious thing about celestial stones was that after the celestial energy in the celestial stone was drained, as long as it was placed in a place filled with celestial energy, it would recover all of its celestial energy after a period of time. This was equivalent to a battery that could be recharged indefinitely. Although the charging time was slightly longer, its value was still there. Compared to ordinary spirit stones that would turn into useless stones after being drained, immortal stones were much more precious. A total of 180 upper-grade energy stones. 120 upper-grade energy stones were used by Wuqi and his company for the teleportation, while the other 60 were paid to Puyuo Heavenly Realm as the toll fee. The few nascent divinity cultivators dared not to slight Immortal Greenstaff. They kept addressing him as Senior Immortal, respectfully asking him if he was here to pay a visit to Immortal Chuan, or if he had other important matters to attend to. A portion of immortal energy was equal to the power of 10,000 portions of supreme-grade energy after being purified. Theoretically, the value of an immortal stone was equal to 10,000 supreme-grade energy stones of the same size. It was not hard to imagine how valuable an immortal stone was. Yanhe, why can I see you everywhere? Immortal Greenstaff took the initiative to provoke him. Wuqi's pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip as he stared at the immortal stone without blinking. When Wuqi and his company walked out from the teleportation formation, a young immortal clad in a purple robe was already waiting outside. He was wearing a white jade medallion on his waist, engraved with 3 vivid lotus flowers. Wisps of immortal energy were constantly coming out from the medallion and coiling around the young immortal. This immortal was none other than the immortal monarch of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, who was in charge of this part of the starry sky, Immortal Li He. Immortal Li He nodded hastily, carefully flattering Wuqi and his company, then invited Wuqi and his company to follow him to a cave abode a few miles away. An extremely complicated teleportation formation was constructed here, with a total of 36 layers of formation diagrams. Embedded in the center of the formation was not an ordinary energy stone, but a pale golden immortal stone, about the size of a human head, emanating a faint immortal energy. There were 2 ways to obtain an immortal stone. One was produced in a rare energy vein, which was formed by the condensation of immortal energy. The other was produced in the best energy stone vein, where it had to be compressed and condensed for at least 1 eons before it could produce an immortal stone. Either way, the preciousness of an immortal stone was self-evident. The Minor Heavenly Circle Realm where Wuqi and his company were currently located was a roughly rectangular landmass, measuring about 1 billion miles in length, 500 million miles in width, and 100 million miles in thickness. The gravity here was at least 10 times stronger than that of Myriad Immortals' planet. If an ordinary person were to come to this place abruptly, the sudden increase in gravity could easily crush him to death. Immortal Greenstaff only gave him a brief laugh, but immortally he had already answered hastily. Don't worry. Patriarch Jiang Yun of White Cloud Immortal Sect? If I knew Patriarch Jiang Yun is your disciple, I would have paid a visit to you long ago. Don't worry, from now on, the affairs of White Cloud Immortal Sect will be my own affair. Don't worry. Immortal Kuhi flew into a rage. Pointing his finger at Wuqi, he bellowed. Ignorant kid, you're courting death. With the huge landmass, Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, as its core, several dozens of galaxies of various sizes orbited around it in the vast void. Liyuan Galaxy was one of these galaxies, and it was the smallest and most remote one among them. Even so, Liyuan Galaxy still had several hundred planets suitable for cultivators to live on, and several dozens of immortal sects of various sizes. Nominally, all these planets and immortal sects were under the jurisdiction of Immortal Li He of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm. In front of Immortal Li He, Immortal Greenstaff could always put on the appearance of a mighty senior, but when he arrived here, he kept a much lower profile. With a smile on his face, he cupped his fist and bowed to a few nascent divinity cultivators stationed at the edge of the teleportation formation. After that, he paid the required amount of upper-grade energy stones. Energy stones were the amalgamation of natural energies. Even heaven immortals could extract energy from energy stones to improve their cultivation base. However, for existences above the realm of heaven immortals, such as gold immortals, energy stones were just like firewood on the roadside, an auxiliary consumable for them. What gold immortals needed was not energy stones, but immortal stones that were formed purely from immortal energy. Wuqi was laughing in his mind. It seemed like these immortals were the same as mortals, people who fawned on the rich and powerful. Immortal Greenstaff came from Pueyuo Heavenly Realm and Yuanhua Sect. Therefore, Immortal Li He had to pay the energy stones needed for the normal maintenance of the teleportation formation with his own money, and he was an official immortal officer of the Celestial Court. Pueyuo Heavenly Realm was a middle lower tier heavenly realm, 30 times longer than Minor Heavenly Circle Realm. The person stationed here was a 25th tier heaven immortal officially appointed by the Celestial Court, Immortal Chuan. He had nearly 100 heaven immortal subordinates, and over 1,000 nascent divinity officials. The density of natural energy here was comparable to that of Myriad Immortal's planet, and even slightly exceeded it. The gravity here was extremely strong as well, 15 times stronger than that of Myriad Immortal's planet. Fixing his gaze at the immortal stone, Wuqi pulled Princess Zhongli's hand and followed behind Immortal Green Staff, walking into the huge and complicated teleportation formation. Wuqi scanned the surroundings with his divine will, memorizing the key points of this teleportation formation. There was no description about this teleportation formation in the Scroll of Stealing. Obviously, the history of this teleportation formation was not as ancient as the shadowy figure who passed it to Wuqi. Therefore, it was reasonable that he did not know anything about it. Although Wuqi had countless energy stones with him, he did not have even one immortal stone. Indifferently, Immortal Green Staff said, "This is Patriarch Jiang Yun, the founding ancestral master of White Cloud Immortal Sect in Liyuan Galaxy, and also the youngest disciple of Lao Tzu. All these kids are Jiang Yun's disciples and grand-disciples. Immortal Monarch, if anything happens to them in the future, Minor Heavenly Circle Realm was one of the lower-tier heavenly realms in the universe. He had no idea how many low-tier heavenly realms there were in the universe. Among all the landmasses that were shattered and drifted away from Panga continent, they were the smallest, the most dilapidated, the ones with the least resources, and the thinnest natural energy. Suddenly, the pressure from all directions came pressing at them. Wuqi could not help but let out a muffled snort. A stream of energy burst out of his body, transforming into a light barrier that shielded him and Princess Zhonglu. The light barrier kept shaking and fluctuating, and there were a few times when it was nearly crushed by the pressure. Wuqi glanced around and found that everyone had unleashed their magical treasures to protect themselves, especially Catfish Flood Dragon. She had unleashed the custom-made hammer and hovered above her head, shrouded in a pitch-black watery light. It looked like she was the most relaxed and carefree person. Immortal Green Staff gave a cold snort, then abruptly unleashed a large sheet of green light from the wooden staff in his hand. Immortal Green Staff answered indifferently, then tilted his head up and said, "Adjust the teleportation formation to Puyo Heaven. We need to get back as soon as possible." All of a sudden, a bright light shone before their eyes, and their bodies suddenly sank. Wuqi and his company had arrived in a beautiful landscape. They were surrounded by mountains, and amidst the mountains was a lush green lake. There was an island in the lake, and the teleportation formation Wuqi and his company were in was built right on this island. Wuqi rolled his eyes, pointing his finger at Daoist Kuhi as he scolded jokingly. "Where did this wild dog come from? Is it trying to bite people?" But as Immortal Li He and Immortal Green Staff were here, Wuqi dared not to attack them recklessly. Because of his relationship with Immortal Green Staff, Immortal Li He dared not say another word. Very attentively, he invited the company into the teleportation formation. After that, he did not ask Immortal Green Staff for the usual toll. Instead, he fished out a large number of upper-grade energy stones from his own pocket and embedded them into the formation. After that, he bowed to Immortal Green Staff smilingly and took his leave, then activated the formation. There were countless energy veins on Myriad Immortal's planet, but the only place with immortal energy was Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode. On top of that, Tsang-Ao Immortal Abode was not an innate energy vein, but an immortal energy that was forcibly condensed and transformed into natural energy by someone using the energy condensing and immortal ascension ball. Therefore, it did not produce any immortal stones. Chapter 373. As the sword beam approached, a cold breeze shot out in all directions. Immortal Kurhi's flying sword was a lower-grade immortal item of pretty good quality. It had a red hue, but was emanating a faint cold breeze. Vaguely, there was a foot-long flood dragon twisting and turning amidst the sword beam. Obviously, the item spirit in the sword was the soul of a flood dragon. Showing no sign of weakness, Wuqi met the attack head-on. With a flick of his left wrist, 3 golden dragon scales shot out and smashed onto Immortal Kurhi's immortal sword. Flying swords were known for their sharpness, not their weight. Each of Wuqi's golden dragon scales weighed at least 50,000 kilograms, and they were extremely sharp. Driven by the magnetic force, they flew at an incredible speed. 3 loud booms rang out as the dragon scales were knocked back. Wuqi felt a tremendous counterforce coming at him, making him feel a warm sensation in his chest as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Immortal Kuhi, on the other hand, let out a wild cry as his face turned pale with fright. His body trembled 3 times, and the sword beam was knocked far away by the golden dragon scales that weighed as heavy as a mountain. A trickle of blood slowly rolled down from his nostrils, but he quickly wiped it off with his sleeve. Immortal Greenstaff was so happy that he was dancing and laughing out loud. Pointing his finger at Immortal Kuhi, he said, "Kuhi Kuhi, you are a heaven immortal. But your sword beam was knocked off course by my grand disciple? You are bleeding from the nose because of my grand disciple? If this were to spread out, are you going to hang yourself, slit your throat, eat poison, or jump into the river? If you don't kill yourself, how can Huiling sect continue to exist in Puyuo heavenly realm?" Immortal Kuhi stared blankly at Wuqi, then suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. He was caught unprepared by Wuqi's earth element dragon scale shield, and never thought that Wuqi would have such an extraordinary treasure with him. Therefore, Immortal Kuhi had suffered a little loss. The innate earth element energy essence was extremely heavy, and its nature was the most condensed. As it was controlled by Wuqi and smashed onto the sword beam, the item spirit in the flying sword was shaken violently. As a result, Immortal Kuhi was slightly affected, and a trickle of blood trickled out from his nostrils. The injury was not a big deal, but Immortal Greenstaff's words were sharp. As a heaven immortal, he was wounded by a young lad with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm. More importantly, this young lad was Immortal Greenstaff's grand disciple. Immortal Kuhi howled in exasperation, coughing out a mouthful of blood as he took a step forward abruptly. A large sheet of pale red cold air sprayed out from his body as he leaped towards Wuqi with an evil gleam in his eyes. He roared angrily, "Brat, I'm going to grind your bones into ashes, dismember your body into 1,000 pieces, and collect your soul. I'll make you wail in pain day and night, unable to reincarnate." Immortal Greenstaff took a step to the side, and stood in front of Immortal Kuhi, trying to touch Lao Tzu's grand disciple. Lao Tzu is not dead yet. A bright green light shone from the wooden staff in his hand as Immortal Greenstaff casually threw it out. Abruptly, the staff transformed into a green beam of light and flew up into the sky. In just a blink of an eye, a huge tree with luxuriant branches and leaves, standing 1,000 feet tall, and requiring a few people to wrap their arms around it, emerged in midair. As Old Man Greenstaff began to recite an incantation under his breath, the branches of the tree began to sway. Abruptly, countless leaves as sharp as blades spun and flew down from the branches, thrusting towards Immortal Kuhi. The leaves were like blades, slicing through the air and producing a crisp hissing noise. There was a rune blinking on each green leaf. With his eyesight, Wuqi could clearly see that these runes were the Talisman of Sharpness, one of the immortal characters. With the help of these runes, although the leaves were formed from the wood element energies, their sharpness was comparable to ordinary sharp weapons. Staring at the leaves that were falling from the sky, Immortal Kuhi did not have the time to strike. He gave a furious howl as the flying sword flew up once again, transforming into a long beam of light and shooting towards the leaves. Off to the side, Wuqi kept shaking his head. It was easy to tell who was stronger between Immortal Kuhi and Immortal Greenstaff with just a single glance. Immortal Greenstaff was using the spirit-gathering illusory technique, which was an ultimate technique of immortal magic. On the other hand, Immortal Kuhi was using a sword beam to fight against the enemy. Judging from the level of his sword control, he was at the level of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Although Immortal Kuhi had the cultivation base of a heaven immortal, his attainment in magic and divine abilities was really weak. As expected, the sword beam could only block off half of the leaves. When the leaves and the sword beam collided, a deafening boom rang out like a thunderstorm. The sword beam trembled violently, and the sky was filled with green specks of light that drifted in the air after being crushed by the leaves. On the other hand, the other half of the leaves spun and thrust towards Immortal Kuhi while emanating an eerie cold air. Immortal Kuhi tilted his head up, clenched his jaws and said, "Greenwood, this is all you have." With a cold snort, a red gleam flickered in his eyes. A glinting handkerchief embroidered with the pattern of the 8 trigrams emerged from the top of his head, unleashing a large sheet of cloud that wrapped around his body. Streams of cloud were as clear as flowing water, with countless wisps of mist rising from them. When the leaves fell on the cloud, they could only penetrate 2 to 3 inches deep into the cloud before they were shredded by the flowing cloud and mist. Laughing complacently, Immortal Kuhi said arrogantly, "This is the defensive immortal treasure I just found last month, the Cloud Radiance handkerchief. Greenwood, I used to be afraid of you, but with this defensive immortal treasure, I'd like to see what you can do to me now." Staring at the arrogant and complacent Immortal Kuhi, Wuxia stealthily pulled out a white immortal talisman. Before he could unleash the talisman, Patriarch Jiangyun had already stealthily shoved a white talisman into Wuqia's hand and said, "The talisman you have is not powerful enough. This is an upper-grade immortal talisman that I've meticulously crafted using many precious materials this year. It was crafted by me and your master's wives, and its power is at least 3 times stronger than that one. Use this talisman and teach him a good lesson." With an evil smile on his face, Patriarch Jiangyun turned away. Wuqia took over the immortal talisman with a strange smile, then slowly took 2 steps forward. Laughing, Wuqia cried out fiercely, "Immortal Kuhi, aren't you just relying on an immortal treasure to protect yourself? Don't even ask my ancestral patriarch to do it himself, as even I, Wuqia, can deal with you easily. Hee, look at my immortal talisman." With a wave of his hand, Wuqia injected a stream of energy into the immortal talisman, exerting all its power with all his might. Abruptly, the immortal talisman crafted by Patriarch Jiangyun, Immortal Qingxia, and Immortal by Wu transformed into a ball of immortal light the size of a water tank. Countless tiny wisps of cloud shot out from it, blotting out the sky as they shot forward at top speed. A loud boom rang out as the countless wisps of cloud collided with Immortal Kuhi's defensive cloud light handkerchief. The handkerchief immediately rippled violently. Obviously, it had suffered a tremendous impact. Immortal Kuhi was so angry that he began to curse and roar furiously. "Are all of you dead men? He has his disciples to help him in a fight, but what about you?" The dozens of nascent divinity and nascent soul cultivators, following behind Immortal Kuhi, were struck with a sudden realization. But Patriarch Jiangyun took a step forward without saying a word, unleashing an immortal pressure. In an instant, all the dozens of cultivators behind Immortal Kuhi were frozen on the spot, and none of them could move anymore. When it came to a fight between heaven immortals, whichever side had an extra heaven immortal would have an absolute strategic advantage. It was the case for Patriarch Jiangyun today. Princess Zhonglu smiled faintly. An auspicious green light was spinning gently between her palms, and the wood element energies within 1,000 miles suddenly began to fluctuate violently. Following Princess Zhongli's will, an enormous amount of wood element energies kept pouring into the huge tree hovering above Immortal Green Staff's head. In just a blink of an eye, the tree had grown to a towering tree that stood 10,000 feet tall, and its power had increased by more than 10 times. Immortal Green Staff was taken aback, and then he cried out in wild joy, "Kuhi, you deserve the bad luck today." On the other side, Immortal Kuhi cursed at the top of his voice, "Damn it! How did your cultivation base suddenly increase so much? This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense." Before his voice could fade away, the huge tree shook violently. Countless green leaves spun down from the sky and gathered into a palm-sized leaf in midair, spinning gracefully as it drifted down from the sky. The trajectory of the leaf was extremely mysterious. Although Immortal Kuhi's flying sword had been spinning and slashing 39 times in a row, he could not even touch the edge of the leaf. The leaf gently landed on Immortal Kuhi's body. The defensive strength of the 8 trigrams Cloud Radiance handkerchief, which had been weakened by more than half by Wuqia's immortal talisman, was pierced through by the leaf. Amidst a frightening tearing noise, the leaf swept past Immortal Kuhi's left shoulder, forcefully chopping off half of his shoulder and one of his arms. Golden immortal blood splashed and splattered in all directions. Immortal Kuhi howled with pain as he took a few steps back in a sorry state. Before the power of the immortal talisman in Wuqia's hand could be fully unleashed, A large sheet of cloud shot out like a great tidal wave and smashed viciously onto Immortal Kuhi's body. Struck by the rapidly flowing cloud, countless bloody wounds suddenly opened up all over his body. Golden blood sprayed out from the wounds and splashed onto the faces of all the cultivators behind him. In just a blink of an eye, Immortal Kuhi had been badly beaten by the cloud, and nearly all the muscles on the front of his body had been shattered. Seeing that Immortal Kuhi's immortal body was about to be destroyed by the power of the immortal talisman, he let out a miserable howl. Abruptly, a jade pendant hanging on his waist broke apart, unleashing a light barrier that tightly enveloped him. The defensive mechanism in the jade pendant was very strong. No matter how hard the cloud crashed and slammed, it could only produce a few ripples, and could not break through the light barrier. Finally, the power of the immortal talisman began to slowly dissipate. Wuxia shook the completely dimmed immortal talisman, then slowly took a few steps back. Immortal Greenstaff let out a wild laugh. He took 2 steps forward, pointed his finger at Immortal Kuhi, whose body was badly mutilated and his face was completely disfigured, and bellowed, "Kuhi, what else do you have to say today? Do you still have the face to live after being beaten to such a state by a disciple of Lao Tzu?" Immortal Kuhi howled viciously, "Greenwood, you violated the decree of the immortal monarch and tried to kill me here. You're going to have to face the lawsuit." Immortal Greenstaff, who was feeling extremely pleased when he saw his enemy severely wounded, was taken aback. He pointed at Immortal Kuhi and bellowed, "I tried to kill you?" Standing aside, Wuxia grinned coldly and said, "Sure enough, a shameless man is invincible. Old fogey Kuhi, it was you who attacked me first, and in the end, you were severely wounded by my ancestral master with just a single strike. You're really good at distorting the truth. TSK, so all the cultivation of your generation has been focused on your tongue? No wonder your divine abilities and dermic spells are just mediocre." Catfish Flood Dragon murmured under her breath, "All the cultivation is focused on the tongue? I bet this tongue is very chewy." Wuqi's words made Immortal Kuhi jump and scream in anger. All of a sudden, an enormous immortal pressure came falling down from the sky. An old man clad in a purple immortal robe, his body glinting brilliantly, and a green jade medallion with 3 green lotus flowers hanging from his waist, slowly drifted down from the sky. Immortal Greenstaff quickly put away his wooden staff, cupped his fist and bowed to the old man. "Greetings, Immortal Chuan." Immortal Kuhi had already cried out at the top of his voice, "Immortal Chuan, please help us. Yuan Hua sect has violated your decree and killed us." Immortal Chuan cleared his throat and nodded his head lightly. Chapter 374. Immortal Chuan looked at Immortal Greenstaff, who stood respectfully off to a side and did not say a word, then turned to look at Immortal Kuhi, whose face was swollen and body was covered in blood. He cleared his throat lightly, then pressed his right hand on his chest and said, "Fellow immortals, I believe you all know the rules and regulations of the Celestial Court. Outside the jurisdiction of the Celestial Court, you can fight to the death, and the Celestial Court will not be able to intervene." After a brief pause, Immortal Chuan tilted his head up, sighed and said, "But in the jurisdiction of the Celestial Court, in this heavenly realm, anyone who dares to initiate a fight will be severely punished by the rules and regulations of the Celestial Court. If not, how will the Celestial Court keep its face? How will the dignity of all the imperial emperors be kept?" Pointing his finger at the sky, Immortal Chuan said in a deep voice with a solemn expression, "Not only the dignity and face of all the imperial emperors, but also the face of those imperial emperors." Immortal Greenstaff said respectfully, "Immortal Monarch, please make a clear investigation. Yuan Hua sect is not the one who initiated the fight." Meanwhile, Immortal Kuhi stomped his feet and roared, "Could it be that I, a severely wounded man, initiated the fight? You have 2 heaven immortals." Immortal Chuan clasped his hands behind his back, frowning thoughtfully. He looked at Immortal Greenstaff, then at Immortal Kuhi, but did not say a word. A bright gleam flickered in his eyes, and no one could tell what was on his mind. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and looked at Immortal Chuan. This man's expression were very familiar to him. In those years, When Lu Xiaobai offered bribes to the officials of various dynasties, they all had the same expression. Immortal Chuan remained silent for a full 15 minutes. Suddenly, Wuqi walked out, bowed respectfully at Immortal Chuan and said, "Immortal Monarch, may I be so bold as to provide you with the evidence regarding this matter? Also, Immortal Monarch, please question the few immortal officials present here. They can testify that it was Immortal Ke from Huiling sect who first attacked the disciples of Yuanhua sect, forcing our masters to fight back." Covering his hands with his sleeves, Wuqi handed over a storage bag to Immortal Chuan. The storage bag had a storage space the size of a room. There were several metal chests inside, all of which were densely packed with spirit stones of various colors. The number of spirit stones in these chests, if converted to low-grade spirit stones, was a whopping 2 million. Immortal Chuan gave Wuqi a surprised look, then nodded at Immortal Green Staff with a faint smile and said, "Fellow Immortal Green Staff, if you have time in the future, do come to Puyuo Heavenly Realm more often." Without batting an eyelid, Immortal Chuan rolled up his sleeve and took the storage bag from Wuqi's hand. He nodded to Wuqi with a smile and said, "This little guy is smart and quick-witted. He's a promising talent. What is going on today? Who was the one who attacked first? You must explain everything in detail." Immortal Chuan glared at the few nascent Divinity Realm immortal officials standing at the side. The few nascent divinity cultivators dared not to show any neglect. Without hesitation, they stepped forward and dropped to their knees, telling him everything that happened just now. However, after some embellishments, the words Wuqi used to curse Immortal Ke had been changed into something insignificant. On the other hand, the few immortal officials emphasized on the fact that Immortal Ke had unleashed a sword beam to kill Wuqi the moment they met. One of the nascent divinity cultivators with a handsome face said with a righteous tone, "Immortal Monarch, this Immortal Ke is a brutal man. He did not abide by the rules of the Celestial Court and killed someone in public. This is a serious crime." Wuqi bowed deeply to Immortal Chuan and said softly, "Immortal Monarch, you are a wise man. The truth is right here." Immortal Chuan gave Wuqi an appreciative look, clasped his hands behind his back, and said with a cold grin, "Ke, what else do you have to say?" Before the dumbfounded Immortal Ke could say anything to defend himself, Immortal Chuan sneered and said, "Killing someone without teaching is a form of torture, and I can't do that. As for your punishment today, I'll let you know the reason behind it. Are you dissatisfied with me by killing someone in public in Puyuo Heavenly Realm? Are you dissatisfied with the rules of the Celestial Court? Are you dissatisfied with the Immortal Monarchs? Or are you dissatisfied with the Immortal Monarchs who made the rules of the Celestial Court?" Immortal Chuan's tone was extremely heavy. The few dissatisfactions he mentioned made Immortal Ke's face turn deathly pale. He staggered a few steps back, his body drenched in sweat, and dared not to defend himself. But Immortal Chuan would never let him go. Suddenly, he pulled out a silver whip from his hand and gave it a powerful strike, knocking Immortal Ke to the ground. There was a thin layer of flame coiling around the silver whip. Wuqi recognized the flame. It was the white yuan suppressing dark heavenly flame, which had an extremely high temperature from the 9 heavens. It was an upper-grade flame of pure yang, and could easily melt any lower-grade immortal item. Although it was an acquired flame, its power was incredible. A heavenly flame like this could only be controlled by a high-tier heaven immortal. Yet Immortal Chuan's whip actually had a very powerful item like the white yuan suppressing dark heavenly flame on it. It was obvious that this immortal item was crafted by a high-tier heaven immortal and given to Immortal Chuan. According to Lady Dark Goldwater's memory, every immortal monarch who presided over a heavenly realm would be rewarded by the Celestial Court with a powerful immortal item, which served as their immortal treasure. Immortal Chuan's immortal item should be the reward he obtained from the Celestial Court. It was extremely difficult for an itinerant immortal to obtain an immortal item that he could use as he pleased. But although these heaven immortals who joined the Celestial Court were bound by the rules of the Celestial Court, the benefits they received were very real. As soon as the whip lashed out, Immortal Ke let out a miserable howl. Suddenly, a large sheet of white heavenly flame burst out from his body, causing his skin and flesh to sizzle and emit sizzling noises. Then a dozen blood-colored crystal pearls shot out from his body. As the heavenly flame burned his body, it burned his blood essence and caused them to spray out, turning them into blood crystals and falling to the ground. Wuxia counted, and found that there were a total of 16 blood crystals on the ground. Each blood crystal was about the accumulation of 100 years cultivation base of a heaven immortal. With just one whip, Immortal Chuan had stripped away the energy essence and magic power that Immortal Kuhi had accumulated through 1,600 years of laborious cultivation. He was already severely wounded, and now he was taught a heavy lesson by Immortal Chuan's whip, which had severely damaged his vitality. Even if all 16 blood crystals on the ground were returned to him, because of the loss caused by absorbing the blood crystals, he would probably lose 1,000 years cultivation base. With a cultivation base of 1,000 years, Immortal Kuhi was struggling and convulsing on the ground with a faint flame emanating from his body, crying and yelling, but no one knew what he was talking about. The disciples of Huiling sect standing behind him either covered their faces and dared not to look at him, or were staring at Wuxia with hatred in their eyes, as if they were trying to remember his visage deep in their hearts. Wuxia gave these disciples a cold smile, then turned to Immortal Chuan, cupped his fist and said, "Immortal Monarch, you are fair, strict, and impartial. Juniors have great admiration for you." Immortal Chuan pursed his lips into a faint smile and said coolly, "This is what I should do. As the immortal official who is in charge of Pulyuo Heavenly Realm, it is natural for me to uphold the justice of Pulyuo Heavenly Realm." Greenstaff, I suppose you are the one who brought these disciples here to participate in the match? They are all good seedlings, and this little fellow is the best. What is his name? Wuxia smiled and took a step back. Immortal Greenstaff cupped his fist and said, "As you can see, Immortal Monarch, these disciples are the disciples that Greenstaff's last disciple had taken in when he established his own sect. This little fellow's name is Wuxia, and he is the smartest among all of them." Immortal Chuan kept nodding his head. Smilingly, he gave Wuxia a look, then said, Good. I have high hopes for this little fellow. In the future, he will surely be a pillar of support for Yuanhua sect. Greenstaff, you may leave now if you have something to attend to. People of Huiling sect, you may leave now. If you dare to offend the rules of the Celestial Court again, don't blame me for being merciless." Waving his hand, Immortal Chuan signaled everyone to leave. As if they had just lost their parents, the people of Huiling sect carried the dying Immortal Kuhi in their arms and dashed into the teleportation formation, returning to the mountain gate of Huiling sect. Wuxia and the others bowed respectfully at Immortal Chuan as well, then walked into another teleportation formation. The formation flickered with a blinding light, and the company was quickly teleported back to Yuanhua sect's headquarters, Green Cliff Planet. Immortal Greenstaff gave Wuxia a slap on the back of his head and said with a low voice, "Little boy, you do have some good eyesight. Immortal Chuan likes all kinds of energy stones and precious treasures the most. How many things did you give him in that storage bag just now?" Wuxia told him the number of energy stones in the storage bag. After that, he smiled and said, "These are the things Master told me before I came here. He asked me to bring them with me at all times, so that I can use them when I am in urgent need. Considering how Immortal Chuan behaved just now, I think I can give it a try." Immortal Greenstaff nodded happily, then turned to Patriarch Jiang Yun and said, "You do have the mood to do that. TSK 2 million lower-grade energy stones. No wonder Immortal Kuhi was whipped. Now it is not an injustice. Little fellow, you do have a good eyesight, and you can even lower yourself to bribe Immortal Chuan in front of him. This is not something I can do." After talking and laughing for a while, Immortal Greenstaff brought the company out of the teleportation formation. The teleportation formation was located in a valley, surrounded by tall green mountains that looked like a screen. The circular valley measured about 100 miles in diameter. Apart from the tens of teleportation formations of various sizes, it was surrounded by countless exotic flowers and plants. At the foot of the mountains were palaces and pavilions of various colors, while streams were flowing. It was a very beautiful scenery. Upon seeing Immortal Greenstaff walk out of the formation, All the executing disciples around the formation cupped their fists and bowed. Some addressed him as Uncle Master, some as Uncle Master, and many others as Uncle Master, Grand Uncle Master, and so on. Just from the way they addressed him, one could tell that there were quite a number of disciples in Yuanhua sect. It was a clear indication of their seniority. Immortal Green Staff nodded at those executing disciples smilingly, then led the company towards a tall building on the eastern side of the valley. After walking for over 20 miles, Immortal Green Staff explained to Wuxia and the company that this place was the teleportation point that Yuanhua sect specialized in. Some of the palaces and pavilions nearby were the residences of the executing disciples of Yuanhua sect, while some were inns, shops, and even taverns and brothels. The place they were heading to was the Internal Affairs Palace of Yuanhua sect. Wuxia and the company had to register their identities there and get a waist medallion before they could enter the hinterland of Yuanhua sect. Wuxia and the company nodded and answered, then followed behind Immortal Green Staff. However, just as they arrived at the small square in front of the entrance of the Internal Affairs Palace, an old Taoist with a face as dark as ink, a long beard, clad in a black Taoist robe with coiling dragons on it, a tall jade crown on his head, and a long sword carried on his back, was seen walking out from the square, together with a group of over 100 people. When Immortal Green Staff and the old Taoist met face to face, his expression immediately changed. When the old Taoist saw Immortal Green Staff, he suddenly grinned coldly and said, "Green Staff, what are these idlers around you doing?" Immortal Green Staff cried out coldly, "Emol, do you think you can control me?" A gray-haired old Taoist standing next to Taoist Emol glared at him, then took a step forward and unleashed a powerful immortal pressure. Patriarch Jiang Yin sneered. Not to be outdone, he stepped forward and unleashed an immortal pressure that rolled out like a heavenly river. When both immortal pressures collided with each other, Chi-Chi gave a muffled snort as blood sprayed out from his 7 apertures. Surprisingly, Patriarch Jiang Yin and the gray-haired old Taoist had clashed head-on without holding back. Chapter 375. By Care. Clenching his jaws, Patriarch Jiang Yin stared at the white-haired Taoist as a white sword beam shot out from the top of his head. The immortal pressures collided with each other, both combatants using their prime cultivation bases. Originally, Patriarch Jiang Yin was only one step away from the 35th tier Heaven Immortal Realm, as he had obtained many benefits in Myriad Immortals planet, and was nourished by the immortal energy in Song-Ao Immortal Abode. More than half of his body had reached the 35th tier, and his cultivation base had improved significantly. But the old Taoist he addressed as Baikair was a solid 36th tier Heaven Immortal. Therefore, when their immortal pressures collided, Baikair naturally suffered a great loss. Blood was oozing out of Patriarch Jiang Yin's 7 apertures, but not much. Only a few drops of blood were dripping down. But Taoist White Sparrow was the unlucky one. His 7 apertures were like a faucet that was broken, with blood constantly dripping down. His eyes were blinking, his ears were ringing, and his immortal soul was shaken so badly that he nearly fainted on the ground. Taoist White Sparrow was severely wounded by the strike, while Patriarch Jiang Yin only suffered a slight shock. Unwilling to give up, he unleashed his sword beam, and was about to attack Taoist White Sparrow with all his might. Taoist Emol could not help but cry out angrily when he saw Patriarch Jiang Yin's mighty and aggressive attack. "Jiang Yin, how dare you attack someone here?" He pointed his finger out, and a beam of green light shot out. Taoist Emol had also unleashed his sword beam and charged toward Patriarch Jiang Yin. The distance between them was less than 300 feet. 2 sword beams of green and white colors quickly tangled with each other, like 2 great pythons in heat. It was as if 2 serpents in heat were twisting and wriggling in the air. 200s of feet-long beams of sword light were clanging in the air, and the bright light was so bright that it made people's eyes hurt. Not long after that, a miserable wail rang out. Taoist Emol let out a muffled snort, and took 10s of steps back hastily. His face turned deathly pale. Patriarch Jiang Yin snorted coldly and waved his hand toward the sword beam. A white immortal sword, less than 6 inches long, fell into his hand. There were specks of white gleams flashing on the surface of the sword beam. And the sword was leaping and flying like a living being. The flying sword was not damaged at all, and was still shining brightly. The azure sword light fell heavily to the ground. It was a strange flying sword that was about 9 inches long and shaped like an azure bird. There were 2 azure sword wings on the blade, and it had an elegant and simple design. However, the blade of the flying sword was densely packed with sawtooth-like notches. It was obvious that the flying sword had been damaged and could not be used. Wuxia lowered his head and sneered. There were 120 innate grand white spatial breaching pearls on Patriarch Jiangyun's flying sword. Although it wasn't a fully formed treasure, its power was still extraordinary. With the support of the 120 pearls, the power of Patriarch Jiangyun's immortal sword had greatly improved. At the very least, it had reached the standard of a high-grade immortal artifact. Although Taoist Emolwan's flying sword was not bad, it was still a lower-grade immortal sword. How could it withstand the attack of the innate metal element energy at such a close distance? Patriarch Jiangyun gave a long laugh as he opened his mouth and swallowed the flying sword. After that, he cupped his fist and said to Taoist Emolwan, "Thank you for the guidance, Uncle Master." Immortal Green Staff laughed, nodded at Taoist Emolwan, who had an unsightly expression, and said, "Senior brother, you have crossed the line by attacking a junior with your sword. Hee, not only did you attack me with your sword, you even lost to Jiangyun. Perhaps you have taken in too many concubines recently, and have lost your energy?" Both Taoist Emolwan and Immortal Green Staff were elders of Yuanhua sect, possessing the cultivation base of 32nd tier heaven immortals. However, both of them never got along well, and even their disciples often had conflicts with each other. However, due to the rules of Yuanhua sect, they dared not to have a real conflict. But today, his flying sword was destroyed by Patriarch Jiangyun, a junior. Taoist Emolwan's face turned unsightly, as if his entire family had just been killed. He was so angry that his body was trembling slightly. Upon hearing Immortal Green Staff's mocking words, Taoist Emolwan's eyes turned bloodshot with anger. He gave Immortal Green Staff a fierce look and said coldly, "Good, very good." With a wave of his sleeve, Taoist Emolwan grabbed Taoist White Sparrow, who was still in a coma, then transformed into a beam of green light, and brought all the cultivators behind him as they sped away into the distance. Immortal Green Staff roared with laughter. While he was about to say something, Wuxia had already sprung away from the scene. Grabbing the green bird-shaped flying sword that Taoist Emolwan threw to the ground, Wuxia shoved it into the Black Dragon spirit ring, then turned to the dumbfounded Immortal Green Staff and said with a smile, "Even if this sword is broken, I can still recycle some of its materials. I'm very poor, so I'll take advantage of this broken flying sword." No matter it was the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield, or the Celestial Fiend Puppets, they could evolve by absorbing various materials. With this lower-grade immortal item, Wuxia was confident that he could enhance the power of all the miscellaneous items he had. Even though what he did just now seemed like he was picking up some junk, he could not care less about that now. Shaking his head, Immortal Green Staff smiled and said, "Don't worry. Your Uncle Master Emolwan is very generous. A mere flying sword is nothing to me." Grinning coldly, Immortal Green Staff raised his head to look at the sky and said in a low voice, "Jiangyun, explain some things to these boys later. Don't let them be schemed against in our own sect, or else it will be too shameful." Patriarch Jiangyun wiped off the blood on his face and answered respectfully. After that, he nodded at Wuxia with a gratified expression. With some materials and effort, Taoist Emolwan's green flying sword could be repaired. But now that it was snatched away by Wuxia, no matter how thick-skinned Taoist Emolwan was, he would never ask Wuxia for it. Patriarch Jiangyun was very pleased to be able to destroy an immortal item that belonged to Taoist Emolwan. Immortal Green Staff held his head high and brought Wuxia and company into the Internal Affairs Palace. His face was now glowing, and his spirit seemed to have improved greatly. A few young Taoists clad in white Taoist robes hurriedly came to greet them, bowing at Immortal Green Staff as he said, "Great Uncle Master, please forgive us for not welcoming you earlier. May I know what Great Uncle Master has brought us here?" Immortal Green Staff snorted coldly, glaring at these executing disciples and said, "What is Emol Wan doing here just now?" One of the young Taoists answered hastily, "Great Uncle Master Emol Wan has brought Uncle Master White Sparrow, who finished his apprenticeship 100,000 years ago, back to the sect. He also brought over 100 disciples of Uncle Master White Sparrow, saying that they are going to represent our sect in the match against Huiling sect." Immortal Greenstaff sneered, then turned to look at Patriarch Jiang Yin and said, "Jiang Yin, it looks like our children have a competitor." Patriarch Jiang Yin smiled and said confidently, "I won't let them take away this opportunity." Patriarch Jiang Yin was very confident. "Do you think Taoist White Sparrow can find a priceless planet that was sealed off 2 eons ago? Do you think you can find so many excellent spirit pills and magical items to reward your disciples?" Myriad Immortals planet was the source of Patriarch Jiang Yin's confidence. Suddenly, Patriarch Jiang Yin's faint voice transmission rang out in Wu Qi's ears. "Remember this, my disciples. Emol Wan is your ancestral master's enemy. White Sparrow is your master's sworn enemy. It was because of him that I left Yuan Hua sect many years ago. Back then, I chopped off one of his arms with a single sword strike, and the enmity between us is very deep. You have to be very careful in everything you do. If you have any conflict with his disciples, show no mercy." Wu Qi nodded at Patriarch Jiang Yin, then turned to give Princess Zhonglu a look. In the end, both Princess Zhonglu and Catfish Flood Dragon did not take Patriarch Jiang Yin's words seriously. With great interest, Princess Zhonglu glanced at the solemn interior of the Internal Affairs Palace, which was decorated in a very different style from the Imperial Palace of Great Yan Dynasty. As for Catfish Flood Dragon, she fixed her eyes on the few young Taoists in white robes, and saliva was seen coming out from the corner of her mouth. Led by the few young Taoists, Wu Qi and his company slowly came to a hall in the depths of the Internal Affairs Palace. Here, each of them registered their name and cultivation base, then received a few sets of the standard Taoist robes of Yuan Hua sect, and a waist medallion made of white jade. The method of immortals was different from that of mortals. The few executing disciples of Internal Affairs Palace ran their palms across these waist medallions, and immediately, the names of Wu Qi and his company appeared on them, as well as their status in Yuan Hua sect, Greenwood Peak, outer sect disciple. On the other hand, the name medallion of Patriarch Jiang Yin was written on it, Greenwood Peak, outer sect disciple, Jiang Yun. On the back of the medallion, there was an extra label written with striking golden characters, 36th tier heaven immortal, outer sect elder. After everything was done, the executing disciples of Internal Affairs Palace brought in 111 thumb-sized, dark jade slips. They were the most commonly used soul jade slips by the immortal sections. By sending a thread of divine will into the jade slips would ring loudly if the disciple was injured. If the disciple died, the jade slips would crack, and if the disciple's soul was destroyed, the jade slips would shatter into pieces. This was the ultimate method used by the immortal sects to keep track of the disciple's condition, so that they could send reinforcements or seek revenge in case of emergency. White Cloud Immortal Sect did not possess a strong overall strength, and was considered as an overlord in Liyuan Galaxy. Therefore they did not prepare soul jade slips. On the other hand, Yuan Hua sect possessed a formidable overall strength, and they were located in Pulyuo Heavenly Realm, a place where immortal sects stood in great numbers and powerful experts emerged in large numbers. Therefore they had to prepare soul jade slips properly. Otherwise, if a large number of their disciples were killed outside, and the sect did not receive any news about it, it would be a great threat to the foundation and legacy of an immortal sect. This was also the first time Wu Qi saw a soul jade slip. The crafting of this kind of jade slip required a rather rare material called Earth Core Water Abyss Black Jade. Apart from crafting soul jade slips, it was also an excellent material for crafting some strange magical treasures of the Ghost Dao. In the Scroll of Stealing, it was listed as an 8th tier natural treasure. After sending a thread of divine will into the soul jade slip, the executing disciple of Internal Affairs Palace quickly carved Wu Qi's name and background on it. After that, someone would send the soul jade slip back to the sect, storing it in a special soul palace. When everything was done, Immortal Greenstaff brought Wuqi and the company out of the Internal Affairs Palace. He smiled and said, "Come, let's go to Greenwood Peak and have a rest first. Over the years, I've concocted several thousand vats of green bamboo wine, and a few of them have been stored for over 10,000 years. Today, I'll dig them out and have a good drink." 10,000 years old spirit wine? Wuqi's eyes lit up. The wine concocted by immortal cultivators always had the magical effect of improving one's cultivation base and magical power. Needless to say, the effect of 10,000 years old spirit wine was no small matter. The company walked out of the Internal Affairs Palace excitedly. But before they could soar into the sky, a beam of white light had already landed before them. A middle-aged man dressed like a scholar appeared before them with a gloomy face. Upon seeing them, he immediately scolded them. "Greenstaff, are you the one who hurt your junior nephew White Sparrow for no reason? Bullying the weak? You're really something." Chapter 376. Yuanhua Sect on Green Cliff Planet in Pueyuo Heavenly Realm was founded by Patriarch Yuanhua 270 periods ago. After so many years of development, Yuanhua Sect had either uprooted or annexed the other few immortal sects on Green Cliff Planet, and eventually unified the entire planet. During the process, 5 out of the 7 personal disciples of Patriarch Yuanhua had fallen. Now there were only 2 personal disciples with a cultivation base of 30th tier Heaven Immortal Realm, who served as the left and right legacy elders of Yuanhua Sect. One of them was the left legacy elder, Daoist Qi, who was also Immortal Greenstaff's personal master. The other was the right legacy elder, Daoist Min, who was also Daoist Emolwan's personal master, and a middle-aged scholar who came here in a rage to denounce Patriarch Yuanhua. Daoist Min pointed his finger at Immortal Greenstaff's nose and snapped, "Greenstaff, are you trying to overturn the heaven? Yuanhua Sect is now facing a formidable enemy, but instead of working together to fight the enemy, you have disregarded the bigger picture and attacked your fellow disciples, severely wounding them. What exactly are you trying to do?" His eyes went wide, and a faint blue gleam flashed from the depth of his eyes, while an enormous immortal pressure came crashing down. Immortal light flickered on both Immortal Greenstaff and Patriarch Jiangyun's bodies, transforming into a light barrier that shielded all their disciples behind them. The hazy light barrier trembled violently, and the floor tiles where it came into contact with the ground were shattered to pieces. Inch by inch, the light barrier sank into the ground. Both Immortal Greenstaff and Patriarch Jiangyun trembled as they took a few steps back. Wuqi exercised the mystic eyes of universe and gave Daoist Min a glance. Strong waves of immortal energy could be sensed coming out from Daoist Min's chest, lower abdomen, and right thigh. Although it was covered by a long robe, Wuqi could still sense that there were bowl-sized penetrating wounds on his chest, lower abdomen, and right thigh, and they had not fully healed yet. It seemed that what Immortal Greenstaff said was true, that all the Heaven Immortals of Yuanhua Sect were severely wounded at the same time. Just now, when Daoist Emolwan was competing with Patriarch Jiangyun with flying swords, Wuqi already felt that Daoist Emolwan did not have enough strength, and that was the reason why his flying sword was damaged by Patriarch Jiangyun. As for Daoist Min, his injuries were even more severe. When the fleshly body of a Heaven Immortal was wounded, without sufficient spirit herbs to heal it, he could only rely on his own immortal energies to slowly heal himself. It would take him at least 10,000 years to fully recover. Despite being severely wounded, Daoist Min did not focus on healing himself in a secluded cultivation. Instead, he came out to find trouble with Immortal Greenstaff. Obviously, he hated Immortal Greenstaff to the core. Immortal Greenstaff's face turned livid. Clenching his jaws tightly, he resisted the pressure of Daoist Min's immortal pressure and said, "Uncle Master, how can you listen to a one-sided statement?" A blue gleam shot out of Daoist Min's eyes, stretching several feet away. Large sheets of clouds rushed out of his body like a flood, and in just a blink of an eye, the surrounding sky had turned blue. Everyone felt as if they were at the bottom of the ocean. Amidst the rippling blue light, large sheets of pale-colored clouds wheeled at top speed, while an enormous pressure kept pressing down from all directions. As Daoist Min let out a long, faintly discernible cry, A blue cloud dragon, about 100 feet long and as thick as a water tank, appeared out of nowhere, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it charged towards the crowd. The cloud dragon stretched its claws out and slapped heavily onto the energy barrier jointly unleashed by Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yun. A loud boom rang out, and the energy barrier shattered. Immortal Green Staff was forced back tens of steps in a sorry state, nearly knocking a few White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples to the ground. Meanwhile, Patriarch Jiang Yun cried out in pain. His face turned red as he sat down on the ground, unable to move for a long while. The tremendous impact of the cloud dragon shook the immortal energies in Patriarch Jiang Yun's body, and nearly shattered all the meridians in his body. Relentlessly, the cloud dragon leaped down towards Wuxia and the others, spreading its huge claw and slashing down forcefully. The huge claw of the cloud dragon covered an area of about 70 to 80 feet, enveloping Wuxia, Princess Zhonglu Catfish Flood Dragon, Lord Xiansheng, and a few other White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples. A strong water vapor came rushing at their faces, coiling around their bodies like ropes, trying to bind Wuxia and the others. There were even tiny, razor-sharp water vapor that tried to squeeze into their bodies through their pores, causing them a severe pain on their skin, and causing faint bloodstains to come out from their pores. Shameless old fogey. Wuxia cursed under his breath. Amidst an ear-splitting wolf howl, the sword of Greedy Wolf shot out like a dark beam. A barely audible buzzing noise echoed out in the void, while the surrounding earth energies rippled. A great amount of earth energies rushed out from the ground, transforming into magnetic force and shrouding the cloud dragon under Wuqi's control. Following Wuqi's will, he casually dragged the cloud dragon to the side. Taoist Min never dreamed that Wuxia was actually an expert in the divine ability of geocentric magnetism. The magnetic force was condensed purely from earth energy, and since earth was the nemesis of water, it was a perfect counter to his cloud dragon condensed from water vapor. Caught unprepared, the enormous cloud dragon was dragged to the side by a tremendous magnetic force, slamming forcefully into the Internal Affairs Palace behind Wuxia and the others. A loud boom echoed out. The main entrance of the Internal Affairs Palace, along with half of the hall, was crushed by the cloud dragon's claw. A few executing disciples who were standing at the entrance and staring blankly at the scene were also caught in the disaster. The cloud dragon's claw crushed all their bones into pieces, and the acquired water vapor squeezed into their bodies, tearing them apart like an electric drill sharpening a blade. The extreme pain made the few executing disciples scream shrilly, and they nearly burst into tears. Taoist Min's face suddenly turned purplish red. Flustered and exasperated, he leaped up and roared furiously. "Who is it? Who is it? Old Qi, are you the one who secretly attacked us?" Before his voice could fade away, Wuqi's sword of Greedy Wolf had already pierced towards Taoist Min. Taoist Min roared furiously, slapped his sleeve, and was about to knock the sword away. He did not even look Wuqi in the eye. He did not believe that it was Wuqi, a puny nascent soul cultivator, who had used the magnetic force to pull his cloud dragon away. He was a 30th tier heaven immortal. How could he be fooled by a nascent soul cultivator, who was weaker than an ant? A loud clang rang out. The sword of Greedy Wolf was knocked flying far away by Taoist Min's sleeve, and the sword beam did not even break a thread on his sleeve. Wuqi's heart sank. Sure enough, there was a huge gap between his cultivation base and that of a heaven immortal, and the grade of the sword of Greedy Wolf was still too low. An enormous pressure came pouring down from all directions, as 18 cloud dragons leaped towards Wuqi and his company in a row. This time, Taoist Min had all his attention focused on these 18 cloud dragons. The power of each cloud dragon was at least 100 times stronger than the one Wuqi pulled away just now. Clenching his teeth, Wuqi exercised the magnetic force, trying to divert the momentum of these cloud dragons. But it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. How could he defeat Taoist Min when he became serious? Taoist Min, who had turned serious, finally noticed Wuqi as well, and realized that the magnetic force that kept gushing out from his body was actually coming out from Wuqi. Laughing fiercely, Taoist Min said, "So it is really you? How dare you disrespect and rebel against your master? How dare you attack an elder of our sect? A disobedient disciple like you must be severely punished." You must be severely punished." Blue immortal energies rushed out from his body, while the 18 cloud dragons suddenly expanded to 100 times their original size. The enormous pressure made Princess Zhonglu, Catfish Flood Dragon, Lord Xiansheng, and all the other disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect lose their balance, and were forced to kneel down on the ground. When facing the immortal pressure unleashed with full force by a 30th tier heaven immortal, apart from kneeling down, there was nothing else they could do. Wuqi turned around and gave them a glance. Princess Zhonglu, Lord Xiansheng, and Catfish Flood Dragon were trembling, trying to stand up, but no matter how hard they tried, they just could not. Princess Zhongli's pretty face turned red, and she stared at Daoist Min with her eyes wide open in humiliation. Wuqi felt as if he was being pressed down by a great mountain as well. His knees were hurting, and he was forced to kneel down slowly. He was powerless to resist, and he could not even control his own life and death. The humiliated expression on Princess Zhongli's face made Wuqi suddenly recall the time a long, long time ago, when he, Wu Wang, and Lu Xiaobai were trapped in a secret cave in the belly of a mountain, and their life and death were controlled by someone. It was a desperate situation where they had no control over their own life and death. This scene was so similar to the scene at that time. He could not accept this. His woman, Princess Zhonglu, was actually forced to kneel down before this old fool? Why? Kneel to the heaven, kneel to the earth, kneel to our ancestors, kneel to our masters, and kneel to our seniors. But why should I, Wuqi, and all the people around me, kneel before an immortal like Daoist Min? Is it because you are strong enough? Is it because you are strong enough? The black dragon spirit ring shook, and a great amount of blood and soul crystals were spat out from it, fusing directly into Wuqi's fingertips. Through the meridians on his fingertips, they flowed to the 7 stealing heaven meridians in Wuqi's arms. Then Tenjin Dan shone with a blinding light, as the enormous blood essence of a heaven immortal rushed into them in an instant, causing Wuqi's Tenjin Dan to expand to their current limit. 7 foundation, 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls split. As Wuqi recited the incantation in a low voice, Wuqi's complete 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls suddenly split apart, transforming into 10 bright beams that rushed into Tenjin Dan. All of a sudden, the Tenjin Dan were filled with sentience, as the 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls fused into the Jin Dan. Vaguely, the spirit embryo of Jin Dan, who sat cross-legged and looked exactly the same as Wuqi, could be seen sitting cross-legged inside the Jin Dan. After the Jin Dan spirit embryo took shape, the enormous heaven immortal's blood essence and energy essence that nearly burst Wuqi's body was suddenly absorbed by the 10 Jin Dan spirit embryos. On top of that, Wuqi could vaguely sense that the Jin Dan spirit embryos did not feel full. The black dragon spirit ring was wiggling slightly. Through its direct connection with Wuqi, it was injecting blood and soul crystals into Wuqi's body like a stream of water. A strange innate energy was circulating inside Wuqi's body, while the enormous blood essence and energy essence kept fusing into the Jin Dan spirit embryos. After the Jin Dan spirit embryos took shape, the speed at which Wuqi could absorb natural energies and transform them into innate energies had increased by at least 10 times. A part of the blood essence and energy essence was fed back through Wuqi's body, rushing into the earth element dragon scale shield, spirit restricting rope, cold electric mirror, sword of greedy wolf, and a few other magical items he carried with him. The enormous innate energy and heaven immortal's blood essence and energy essence had stimulated the few magical items to undergo a strange transformation. Abruptly, the earth element dragon scale shield had digested 30% of the power of the purple immortal sword it devoured in the ice tunnel. Magnetic force arise. A dark gleam burst out from Wuqi's body, as the dark magnetic force rushed out like electric currents, producing buzzing noises. The surrounding gravity was thrown into a great mess. Princess Zhonglu and all the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect felt their bodies become lighter, and they rose to their feet one after another. A furious howl echoed out, as Catfish Flood Dragon cursed loudly. She wielded her black hammer, which was as big as a small house, and thrust it towards Daoist Min. Daoist Min's eyelids twitched furiously as he cried out sternly, "How dare you go against your superiors? Banish all of you." Seeing that Wuxia was able to break through the suppression of the cloud dragon mystic art which he had been exerting seriously, Taoist Min was so furious that he felt his blood was burning. He had lost a lot of face today. Taoist Min gave up the thought of fooling around, and was about to strike with all his might and kill Wuxia and his companions. Since the crime had been committed, with his status as the sect elder, it was a piece of cake for him to kill a few outer sect disciples who dared to go against his superiors. With a flip of his palm, and as he was about to unleash a deadly strike, a green bamboo stick suddenly thrust over from the side at lightning speed. Slap! The bamboo stick viciously slapped onto Taoist Min's face, making him howl miserably and tumble several hundred feet away. Chapter 377. Before Immortal Green Staff and Patriarch Jiang Yin could say anything, Wuxia had already howled at the top of his lungs. Great Ancestral Master, please uphold justice for us. We have traveled tens of thousands of miles to Green Cliff Planet to serve our master. And yet, we are treated like this. It has really disappointed many of us outer sect disciples. Taoist White Sparrow provoked us with his immortal pressure. Ancestral Master Imo Luan killed us with a sword beam. And Grand Ancestral Master Kuang shielded his disciple. Is this how we are going to be repaid for our sincerity? Taoist Min threw his head back and let out a furious roar. Abruptly, his body transformed into a cloud and shot up into the sky, disappearing without a trace in just a blink of an eye. Taoist Chi kept laughing and saying, "That's reasonable, that's reasonable. Come, quickly follow me to meet the Ancestral Master." He strode up to Lord Xiansheng, took a few turns, and said with a frown, "You look like a human, and there is nothing unsightly about you. You can use some spirit talismans that can conceal your aura to fool us. Who would know who you are?" From the bottom of his left ear to the left corner of his mouth, there was a black line that looked very glaring to the eyes. It kept swelling, and gradually turned pinkish golden and translucent, filled with pale golden blood. Taoist Min was severely beaten by the bamboo stick, and it was hard to tell if he was dead or alive. He covered his face with both hands and grunted for a long time, before finally clenching his jaws and climbing to his feet. A Taoist, who stood over 10 feet tall, with the waist of a bear and the back of a tiger, and a rugged face that gave him an air of dementia, was striding toward them with a wicker basket in his hand and a verdant bamboo stick in his hand. He gave Taoist Min a look, then said in a low muffled voice, "Junior brother, since you bullied my disciple, I'll teach you a lesson. If you dare to strike again, I'll turn against you. Master is in a secluded cultivation, and no one will care even if I kill you." After that, Taoist Chi turned to look at Catfish Flood Dragon, who had a big catfish head on her head. Frowning, he came next to Catfish Flood Dragon, giving her a measuring look with a wry smile. Shaking his head helplessly, he said, "Jiang Yun, tell me, why did you choose a big dark fish as your disciple? Well, I'm sure you know the difference between humans and demons. You can't use the identity of a demon cultivator." Immediately, the impression the people from White Cloud Immortal Sect had towards Taoist Min became even worse. How did he manage to gain a foothold in Yunhua sect with such an immoral teacher? Taoist Chi snorted coldly, then he murmured, "According to this logic, I'm older than you and my cultivation base is stronger than you. If I take a fancy to one of your female disciples, and force her to be betrothed to my disciples and grand disciples, wouldn't you have to agree to it?" Well, it was not right to say that he was gnashing his teeth. Half of his teeth were loosened, and once he did so, the piercing pain almost made him howl out loud. He could only grimace and exhale heavily as he shouted in an extremely embarrassed manner, "Old Chi, you attacked me?" Taoist Chi stared blankly at Taoist Min and said, "Inappropriate? What's wrong with that? Tell me what's wrong with that?" Wu Chi cupped his fist and bowed to Taoist Chi, then laughed and said, "Great Ancestral Master, the fact that my master was able to take a Dragon King of a water domain, who was conferred by the Celestial Court, as his outer sect disciple, proves that Yuan Hua sect's reputation has spread far and wide. Therefore, all the immortals from all walks of life have come to join us. This is a very auspicious sign." It was a verdant bamboo branch, about 10 feet long, with a total of 36 sections. A thin green golden talisman was attached to each section. The thickest part of the bamboo branch was as thick as a thumb, and the thinnest part was as thin as a green bean. When activated by the talisman, its weight was no less than that of a lofty mountain. Taoist Min, who did not put up his guard, immediately suffered a great loss when he was slapped in the face by such a bamboo branch. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and kept grinning evilly. Suddenly, he recalled that their ancestor was indeed Wanying Dragon King, a Dragon King who was officially conferred the title of Dragon King. Although his status was equal to the leader of a production team, and in the civil service system of the Celestial Court, he was just a sesame-sized Dragon King who was conferred the title of Dragon King. Their ancestor was actually conferred by the Celestial Court, and was ordered to manage the water system of Longyuan River. Taoist Min sneered. Suddenly, he pointed at Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon and said, "I have no idea what Jiang Yun has done over the years, but as a disciple of Yuan Hua sect, I can't believe that he has colluded with demon cultivators, and that there are demon cultivators among his disciples. This is a great disgrace to Yuan Hua sect. With such conduct, how could he represent Yuan Hua sect in the match against Huiling sect? Demon cultivators. Yuan Hua sect actually has a demon disciple. Isn't this just letting all the fellow immortals in Puyo Heavenly Realm digest this?" "Hold on." Taoist Min, who was pushed into a corner by Taoist Qi, cried out sternly, "Senior brother, this is not appropriate." Taoist Min sneered complacently and said, "Green Staff, you are really muddle-headed. If your disciple has taken a demon cultivator as his disciple, doesn't that mean Yuan Hua sect is also a monster? This will be a great blow to the prestige of Yuan Hua sect. If Huiling sect learns about this, how can we still have the face to compete with them?" Taoist Min was struck dumb by Wu Qi's counterattack. With a trembling body, he stared at Wu Qi and snapped, "How presumptuous! How did I disobey the decree of the Celestial Court?" The Celestial Court was the governmental organization that ruled over Pangu continent and many heavenly realms in the universe. It had a great prestige, as well as a very powerful force. It was not something that could be easily shouldered by anyone who disobeyed the decree of the Celestial Court. Taoist Qi's face was gloomy and he did not say a word. Immortal Green Staff said cautiously, "Master, both of them are Jiang Yun's outer sect disciples." She was knocked flying far away by a bamboo stick, and her hammer missed its target. She was about to continue attacking Taoist Min, but was dragged back by Lord Xiansheng. Before Taoist Qi could say anything, Taoist Min immediately cried out, "Listen! Listen! The people from Huiling sect have seen this. How can we ignore something that is damaging to the reputation of Yuan Hua sect? Quickly cripple Jiang Yun and the others' cultivation base, and drive them out of Green Cliff Planet." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi turned to Lord Xianxing and said, "Elder brother, your ancestor is from the bloodline of the Dragon King, who was conferred the decree of the Celestial Court." Wu Qi let out 2 loud howls, and tears immediately sprayed out from his eyes. He had learned Lady Dark Goldwater's Dark Een water scripture, which allowed him to freely control the water vapor around him. Therefore, he could freely control the water content in his body. With a thought in his mind, tears immediately burst out from his eyes, and Wu Qi looked as if he had suffered a great grievance. Lord Xianxing suddenly came to his senses. He fished and rummaged in his storage ring for a while, then fished out a large seal that shone with a bright blue gleam. The seal was engraved with a pattern of fishes and shrimps playing in the water, and a vague image of a dragon was seen rolling and rocking in the water. At the bottom of the seal were 8 ancient seal characters, conferred the Lord of Longyuan River by the Celestial Court. It was the certificate of Dragon King of Longyuan River that Lord Xianxing used as a toy when he was young, and he had kept it with him all the time. For generations, the clan of heavenly dragons had maintained a good relationship with the Celestial Court, and all the water systems under the heaven were under the jurisdiction of the descendants of heavenly dragons. Any Dragon King of the Flood Dragon lineage with the title of Dragon King would have been conferred by the heavenly courts. Who said that the Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court is an evildoer? Wu Qi said softly. How dare you?" Wu Qi's eyes lit up. So this man was Taoist Qi? Immortal Green Staff's master? He really liked this temperament. It looked like this Taoist Qi was born with a one-track mind, and Wu Qi really liked this kind of person. Taoist Qi was struck dumb. He stared blankly for a while, then turned to look at Lord Xiansheng. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. No wonder Immortal Green Staff and Taoist Min's clan did not get along with each other, as if they were mortal enemies. So this is the reason? Immortal Green Staff is an amazing man. He actually managed to snatch Taoist Min's dual cultivation partner? This is a brutal slap on Taoist Min's face. With this, he will never be able to raise his head again for the rest of his life. Taoist Min was struck dumb, and Taoist Qi was also struck dumb. Suddenly he burst out laughing. Taoist Min touched the gash on his face and said in a ferocious voice, "Old Qi, just pretend that what happened just now never happened. But since your disciple is recruiting a demon cultivator as his disciple, obviously he is already a top genius. Severe punishment. He must be severely punished. Jiang Yun and all the disciples he brought here will have their cultivation base crippled. And they will be driven out of Green Cliff Planet. If you don't do it now, don't blame me for complaining to my master." Taoist Qi murmured under his breath. Even outer sect disciples can't do it. Demon cultivators. They are demon cultivators who can't even transform into human forms. Only existences at the realm of Gold Immortal or above could have the qualification to resist the decree of the Celestial Court occasionally. How could an immortal sect like Yinhua sect have the courage to resist the Celestial Court? All the disciples of White Cloud Immortal sect were staring blankly at Immortal Green Staff as well, marveling in their minds that this ancestral master of theirs was indeed an amazing man. He actually managed to snatch the girl that their uncle master had taken a fancy to. Taoist Min was a wicked man who took advantage of his position to bully others and abduct innocent girls, while Immortal Green Staff was naturally a hero who saved the people when they were in danger. Noticing that Taoist Min refused to let go of this topic, Wu Qi frowned and said in a cold voice, "Senior Min, you keep saying that my two brothers and sisters are demon cultivators? How audacious of you! How dare you disobey the decree of the Celestial Court? You! How dare you?" Taoist Qi shook his head as if nothing had happened and said, "You are not my match in a fight. According to the sect rules set by my master, if any disciple dares to hurt a fellow disciple, his or her cultivation base will be crippled and he or she will be expelled from the sect. Junior brother, you see, these disciples of Internal Affairs Palace did not offend you. Why did you hurt them for no reason? Don't tell me it was not your Ocean Dragon Cloudy Sky spell that injured them." Wu Qi breathed out a sigh of relief. Now he had one more enemy. Taoist Qi's eyes went wide as he stared at Taoist Min, whose face had turned livid. He sneered and said, "Junior brother, how dare you bully my disciples? Isn't it just because Green Staff snatched the partner you fancied years ago? Green Staff and Green Grasshopper are in love with each other, and they are willing to become partners. What are you trying to do by meddling in their relationship? You are older, and your cultivation base is higher. Do you think that anyone you fancied must marry you? That is unreasonable." Waving his hand, Taoist Qi pointed at the few executing disciples of Internal Affairs Palace, who had their bones broken by Cloud Dragon, and said, "Why are you guys still in a daze? Should we send them to Pill Healing Palace for treatment? Are we going to watch them die in vain? Green Staff, and it's you Jiang Yun. Don't just stand there in a daze. Follow me to pay a visit to the Ancestral Master. He is worrying about the match with Huiling Sect." Immortal Green Staff murmured in a low voice, "I already know. We bumped into people from Huiling Sect on the way." As the most painful scar of his life was abruptly torn open in front of so many juniors, Taoist Min was so angry that he jumped up and down violently, his long hair standing straight up. "Old Qi, are you trying to fight me to the death?" he roared with a stern voice. Chapter 378. Green Cliff Planet was famous for its Green Cliff Mountain. The headquarters of Yuanhua sect was built amidst the lofty mountains and lofty ridges that stretched over 10,000 miles around Green Cliff Mountain. Countless peaks were like a host of stars surrounding the moon, surrounding and protecting the Green Cliff Mountain that was 50 kilometers tall and over 10 kilometers wide. It was oddly shaped like a sword, and it was completely translucent and dark green in color, and was formed from a pool of green jade. Immortal cultivators were experienced and knowledgeable, and they had seen all kinds of marvelous sights. But they had never seen or heard of a mountain like Green Cliff Mountain, which was entirely made up of green jade. There was a rumor among the immortal cultivators of Piluo Heavenly Realm, and the few surrounding heavenly realms that the Green Cliff Mountain was originally the sword of an ancient almighty being. When he died, the sword fell into the Green Cliff Star, and that was how this marvelous scene was created. No matter what people said, it was an undeniable fact that Green Cliff Mountain was a majestic mountain with a beautiful scenery. The cave abode of Patriarch Yuanhua, the founding patriarch of Yuanhua sect, was located right in the middle of Green Cliff Mountain. Halfway up the mountain, there was a platform about 1 acre in circumference, with a crescent-shaped arch at the end. A few young boys were seen standing in front of the arch with their hands hanging down. Together with the purple Ganoderma immortal herbs, white cranes, black deer, and many other plants in the vicinity, it gave off a very immortal atmosphere. Inside the cave abode was a small cave abode that measured nearly 1,000 miles in circumference. It was a small cave abode created by Patriarch Yuanhua using his own immortal energy. Several hundred energy veins were gathered under the cave abode, transforming the natural energies into immortal energy through an excellent quality energy condensing and immortal ascension ball. As a result, this small cave abode was filled with immortal energy, only slightly weaker than Song-Ao Immortal Abode. It was in this small cave abode named Green Cliff Immortal Abode that Wuxia met Patriarch Yuanhua for the first time in front of an exquisite wooden hut. It was surrounded by towering cypress trees, giving off a quiet and ethereal atmosphere. Apart from a few birds squatting on the branches, and Patriarch Yuanhua sitting on a hassock in front of the wooden house, there were no other living beings in this place. Daoist Qi strode to the front of the wooden house and roared, "Master, that Jiangyin, who was forced to leave the sect because he used a sword to injure a fellow disciple, is back. He brought 110 disciples with him, and each of them is an expert." TSK, just now, Junior Marshall brother was trying to find trouble with them, and was chased away by this disciple with a bamboo stick. Patriarch Yuanhua was thin as a pine tree, but the right half of his upper body was gone, and was now wrapped in a white veil. Slowly he opened his eyes, and a faint stream of purple-green immortal energy sprayed out of his nostrils. He nodded slowly and said in a low voice, "It's Jiangyin? Back then, you took the blame for Green Staff. But no matter what, you have to be punished for injuring a fellow disciple." Clearing his throat, Patriarch Yuanhua said slowly, "As for this, if your disciple can win the match against Huiling sect, I'll let you return to our sect with this credit. Don't be an outer sect disciple. With your current cultivation, you're qualified to be an inner sect elder." Patriarch Jiangyin dropped to his knees and gave Patriarch Yuanhua a few kowtows reverently, then answered in a low voice, "Yes." After Immortal Green Staff brought Wu Qi and the others to greet Patriarch Yuanhua, Daoist Qi plopped himself down next to Patriarch Yuanhua and shouted, "But Master, Junior Marshall Brothers' disciple has also brought a group of disciples with him. Are you really going to let Jiang Yun's disciples participate in the match?" Patriarch Yuanhua nodded and said with a smile, "Just now, Emil Wan brought his disciples to greet me as well. But White Sparrow's disciples are far weaker than Jiang Yun's disciples. As I'm the leader of Yunhua sect, naturally, I have to do everything for the sake of the sect. I'll let whoever has a higher chance of winning go." Patriarch Yuanhua coughed lightly, and some golden blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Helplessly, he pointed at the missing half of his body and said with a bitter smile, "I've embarrassed myself in front of you, my children. Reverend Huilin, the founding ancestral master of Huiling sect, has a cultivation base similar to mine. That day, we fought each other with all our might, and as a result, both of us were severely wounded." Wu Qi twitched his lips. The injury was indeed a miserable one. For heaven immortals, especially those middle and high-tier heaven immortals, their immortal bodies were the result of hundreds of thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of years of hard work. Ordinary immortal spells could hardly seriously injure them, but once they were wounded, the source of immortal energy would be severely damaged, and the injury would be extremely difficult to heal. For the injury Patriarch Yuan Hua was suffering right now, without 2 periods of dedicated cultivation, or without the help of immortal pills of excellent quality, it would be extremely difficult for him to recover. Wuqi, who happened to be standing behind Patriarch Jiang Yun, poked Patriarch Jiang Yun with his finger and transmitted his voice to him. Spirit pills, immortal pills. Patriarch Jiang Yun was taken aback, and then he suddenly came to his senses. He quickly took 2 steps forward and dropped to his knees once again. Ancestral Master, over the years, I was lucky enough to find some decent spirit herbs and a few ancient pill formulas. I've just concocted a cauldron of 7th grade immortal pills, the Calamity Recovery Pill. It's a pity that I only managed to concoct 2 pills. I wonder if they can be of any help to you, Ancestral Master? Carefully, he fished out a flat jade box from under his sleeve, held it over his head, and presented it to Patriarch Yuan Hua. A 7th grade immortal pill? Patriarch Yuan Hua was struck dumb with astonishment. He gave Patriarch Jiang Yun a look, then turned to look at Wuqi. Nodding, he said with a smile, "If it is really a 7th grade immortal pill, I might be able to fully recover from my injury in a few months. A 7th grade immortal pill is an excellent pill that even 1st-tier heaven immortals treasure. Who would have thought?" After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua grabbed the jade box with his left hand and opened its lid with a shake of his wrist. Inside were 2 immortal pills, each the size of a longan, with countless green mists and golden gleams swirling rapidly inside. They looked like 2 glass pearls. Right after the lid was opened, the 2 immortal pills immediately produced a light swooshing sound, as the surrounding immortal energies kept being sucked into them like streams of water. They are indeed 7th grade spirit pills of the upper grade. Birth Calamity Restoration Pill? I've never heard of this name before. Patriarch Yuan Hua frowned and said in a deep voice, "Jiang Yuner, can I have a look at the pill formulas?" Patriarch Jiang Yun nodded hastily, then took out all the ancient pill formulas Wuqi gave him in Songao Immortal Abode, and presented them to Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua was struck dumb. Then he shook his head and said to Daoist Qi with a smile, "Jiang Yuner, you are a simple and kind person, just as you used to be." Patriarch Yuan Hua took over the pill formulas and gave them a brief glance. Then he was taken aback and cried out in surprise, "They are indeed marvelous. The technique of concocting herbs, the technique of controlling fire, and the various hand incantations are completely different from the technique of alchemy nowadays. They are indeed thought-provoking and marvelous." Patriarch Yuan Hua breathed out a long sigh and returned the pill formulas to Patriarch Jiang Yun. After a brief moment of silence, he smiled and said, "Green Staff, you can officially accept Jiang Yun into the sect. These few pill formulas are more than enough to make Yuan Hua sect dominate the entire Pulyuo heavenly realm." Patriarch Jiang Yun was struck with wild joy. He kept kowtowing and thanking Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled as he helped Patriarch Jiang Yun to his feet with one hand. After that, he gave Wuqi a deep look and said, "You are Wuqi, right?" Very good, very good." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua waved his left hand. Soundlessly, a pale blue flying sword, as thin as a willow leaf and measuring only 7.2 inches long, flew before Wuqi. Patriarch Yuan Hua smiled and said, "This is a flying sword I found by accident. Its name is Xuanhao. Take it and protect yourself." The Xuanhao sword was an upper-grade spirit item, and it contained a very strong sentience. It kept twisting and turning in the air like a swimming fish. Wuqi gladly kowtowed to Patriarch Yuan Hua and thanked him, then took over the Xuanhao sword. Patriarch Yuan Hua nodded and smiled, then flicked his sleeve. Beams of bright light shot out, transforming into a flying sword and a set of defensive outfits hovering before each of the 110 White Cloud Immortal Sect disciples brought here by Patriarch Jiang Yun. Patriarch Yuan Hua said in a deep voice, "Since we are going to have the match with Huiling Sect, the defensive treasures must not be too shabby. All the flying swords are mid-grade spirit items, and all the defensive outfits are lower-grade spirit items. Work hard on them. The match will be held in 1 year and 6 months." One after another, Wuqi and the others bowed and thanked Patriarch Yuanhua for the generous gift. Patriarch Yuanhua smiled pleasantly. He shoved the jade box containing the 2 spirit pills into a secret pocket in front of his chest, then turned to Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon and said, "Both of you, come out here and let me have a good look at you. Little boy, are you the Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court?" Lord Xianxing and Catfish Flood Dragon walked out, then dropped to their knees and bowed to Patriarch Yuanhua. After that, Lord Xianxing rose to his feet and said respectfully, "My father is the Lord of Longyuan River, which stretches for nearly 100 million miles, and can be considered as one of the major rivers. As for me, I have received an official document from my father, and am now the lord of a certain ocean." Lord Xianxing fished out the seal that originally belonged to Weining Dragon King, and handed it over to Patriarch Yuanhua respectfully. Patriarch Yuanhua took the seal and gave it a glance, then smiled pleasantly and said, "You are indeed a legitimate Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court. Also, judging from the rules of this seal, your clan can be considered as a legitimate dragon with a long history." After returning the seal to Lord Xianxing, Patriarch Yuanhua said, "It is a great news that a Dragon King conferred by the Celestial Court has become my disciple. Jiangyan, you are indeed an excellent disciple of Yuanhua sect." Patriarch Jiangyan nodded with a smile, not saying a word. Patriarch Yuanhua turned to look at Catfish Flood Dragon curiously. When he saw the big fish head on her head, he smiled wryly and said, "Don't tell me you can't transform into a human. Your dragon energy and magic power are quite strong. Well, you are a member of the Dragon King's bloodline, and you can be considered as a subordinate of the Celestial Court, even if..." When he said that, Patriarch Yuanhua shut his mouth. Wuqi could guess what he wanted to say. After all, Catfish Flood Dragon was a subordinate of the Celestial Court. Even if she had an ugly appearance, she was still a subordinate of the Celestial Court. Who would dare to say a word of nonsense? Patriarch Yuanhua chose a few other disciples from White Cloud Immortal Sect, and exchanged a few words with them. Patriarch Yuanhua's words and actions were like a spring breeze caressing one's face, bringing warmth to one's heart. All the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect were very excited, and they could not wait to kill all the disciples chosen by Huiling Sect. Just as everyone was laughing and talking harmoniously, a few streaks of cloud light suddenly approached them at high speed. Daoist Min, who had nearly recovered from the injury on his face, rushed over with a gloomy face. He told Patriarch Yuanhua in a deep voice, "Master, Reverend Huilin is here." He said that Martial Nephew Green Staff ignored Immortal Monarch's mediation, and set up an ambush along the way, wounding that mongrel Kurhi. Patriarch Yuanhua's face darkened instantly. Grinning coldly, he said, "How dare he bully us? My boys follow me out, and prepare to kill." Patriarch Yuanhua, who looked like an old grandpa next door a moment ago, suddenly turned into a furious butcher, emanating an astonishing killing intent. Chapter 379. Hovering above Green Cliff Mountain. An old Taoist with one arm and one leg was seen hovering in midair, his face filled with a murderous aura. Missing an arm, this old Taoist priest's left arm and shoulder were chopped off. Missing a leg, this old Taoist priest's right thigh was blown away by the heavenly thunder, and only a small part of the leg bone barely connected his calf to his body. There was also a thin, flat hole in his chest. Obviously, it was caused by a flying sword. The injury was more serious than Patriarch Yuanhua's. Without a few periods of arduous cultivation, or the use of powerful immortal pills, it would take a long time for him to fully recover. However, the life force of immortals was extremely strong, and the higher the level of an immortal, the stronger their life force would be. According to the legends, as long as the immortal soul of a first-tier heaven immortal did not dissipate, he would be able to live a good life, even if he only had a head left. That was why this old Taoist could still hover arrogantly on Green Cliff Mountain, provoking Yuanhua sect with a stern voice even though he was severely injured. "Yuanhua, you old fogey! How could you ignore Immortal Chuan's mediation and send your disciples to ambush my disciples? You've gone too far." The old Taoist, Reverend Huilin, the founding ancestral master of Huiling sect, pointed his finger at Green Cliff Mountain and shouted, "Show yourself! Show yourself now! Today you and I will fight to the death." Following closely behind Patriarch Yuan Hua, Wuqi stepped on a sword beam and shot into the sky. Reverend Huilin was the only disciple from Huiling sect, while on the side of Yuan Hua sect, a dozen heaven immortals and over 100 nascent divinity cultivators had already deployed a killing formation with the 6 directions of the southern divinity 6 stars embedded within, trapping Reverend Huilin within. The eye of the formation was Green Cliff Mountain, where 3 heaven immortal elders of Yuan Hua sect were sitting cross-legged, guarding 6 pale red flying swords that were wheeling in the sky. Reverend Huilin was trapped by the formation, and Patriarch Yuan Hua had arrived before him. But he showed no fear, just proudly clasped his hands behind his back and looked up into the sky. Patriarch Yuan Hua could not help but give a cold snort when he saw how calm and composed he looked. "Old fogey Huilin, why are you provoking Yuan Hua sect for no reason?" Reverend Huilin glared at Patriarch Yuan Hua and said furiously, "You think I'm stirring up trouble for no reason? Your disciple Greenstaff injured my disciple, Yen He. You have to give me an explanation." Patriarch Yuan Hua rolled his eyes. Without wasting any time, he casually waved his hand into the sky. Immediately, all the clouds within 10,000 miles of him began to rustle and quickly gather towards his palm. In just a blink of an eye, a white thunderball the size of a rice bucket appeared in Patriarch Yuan Hua's palm. Without uttering a single word, he threw the thunderball towards Reverend Huilin. Reverend Huilin let out a cold snort as well. His eyes widened, and suddenly, a clear spring appeared in front of him. A lotus quickly sprouted from the spring, and in the blink of an eye, it had become luxuriant with branches and leaves. 3 tender and delicate lotus flowers slowly sprouted from it. The 3 lotus flowers, each about 10 feet in circumference, trembled lightly and firmly blocked the incoming thunderball. With a muffled sound, the surrounding air trembled. The ball of lightning and the lotus were destroyed at the same time. 2 sword cries rang out, as a white sword beam shot out from the top of Patriarch Yuan Hua's head, thrusting towards Reverend Huilin's chest. Similarly, a yellow sword beam flew out from behind Reverend Huilin's back, transforming into a cold beam that looked like a great python with scales and claws, thrusting towards Patriarch Yuan Hua's flying sword. 2 sword beams collided like 2 mad bulls. They twisted, tangled, stabbed and scratched each other, and fought fiercely in the air. The jarring noises of friction shook the ears of Wuqi and the others who were watching the battle from afar, causing them to feel a sharp pain in their ears, forcing them to seal their eardrums. The stalemate lasted for a full 2 hours. Finally, Patriarch Yuan Hua's mastery of the sword-controlling technique became a notch higher, as he unleashed a thin sword beam diagonally, thrusting towards Reverend Huilin like a lightning bolt. On the other hand, the yellow sword beam unleashed by Reverend Huilin had its glow dimmed, losing its initial power. Seeing that the sword beam was about to pierce through Reverend Huilin's body, Reverend Huilin gave a cold snort, performed an incantation gesture with both hands, and cried out indifferently, "Order! Retreat!" The air in front of him trembled, and a thunderclap rang out. The sword beam was shattered to pieces, turning into countless fireflies in the air. Clang! A loud ringing rang out as Reverend Huilin shattered Patriarch Yuan Hua's sword beam. But at the same time, his flying sword had lost all its flame after being twisted by Patriarch Yuan Hua's white sword beam, transforming into a dark yellow flying sword with a strange shape as it staggered backward in a sorry state. A dim airflow rushed out from the top of Reverend Huilin's head, catching his flying sword and hiding it inside his body. Meanwhile, Patriarch Yuan Hua pointed his finger out, causing the flying sword to shine with a blinding light. Then a 1,000 feet long white beam shot towards Reverend Huilin. Reverend Huilin snorted coldly, then put his hand into his mouth and bit his fingertip. Using his pale golden immortal blood, he drew a fist-sized rune in the air. Wuqi recognized the rune. It was none other than the word "Ah" found in the ancient immortal script, and it possessed an extremely powerful force. As a sonorous incantation rang out, Reverend Huilin shook his wrist, shooting out the golden rune. A loud boom echoed out as the rune exploded, sending a tremendous shockwave that smashed onto Patriarch Yuan Hua's sword beam. The white sword beam dimmed abruptly, as it was knocked tens of miles away by the rune. It swayed and struggled for a while, and could not get up again. Patriarch Yuan Hua's body trembled slightly, and he was forced to take tens of steps back by an invisible force. Both ancestral masters exchanged a glance, then sneered at the same time. Suddenly, all sorts of immortal techniques emerged one after another, and all sorts of flying swords, magical treasures, talismans, and thunder techniques were unleashed at the same time. For a moment, the void was filled with countless blinking lights, and all sorts of thunderclaps that shook the air and made everyone tremble. No one could see where exactly the two ancestral masters were. For experts at the level of Patriarch Yuan Hua and Reverend Huilin, the power of every attack they unleashed was extremely concentrated, and not too much of it would leak out. Therefore, although they were fighting fiercely, it did not affect Wuxia and his companions at all. At most, they would only feel a strong wind blowing across their faces, but it did not cause any actual harm to them. Both of them fought for a while, and at last they were both gasping for breath and soaked in sweat. Then they stopped fighting almost at the same time. Separated by a distance of a few miles, both of them stared at each other for a while. Reverend Huilin did not show any intention to flee, and Patriarch Yuan Hua did not order the formation to be activated either. Relying on the advantage of being their home ground, he could make Reverend Huilin stay here. After panting for a while, both of them began to cough violently at the same time. Both of them had yet to recover from their serious injuries. Now that they had suddenly used up all their strength to fight, the immortal energy in their bodies had already been completely depleted. Furthermore, it had also affected their old injuries, which made them even more injured. They had lost a large amount of blood essence and vitality. When they finally managed to catch their breath, Patriarch Yuan Hua pointed his trembling finger at Reverend Huilin and said with a cold grin, "Huilin, you can't tell right from wrong when it comes to arguing. If you want to talk about reason, we'll have a clear answer in the match hosted by Immortal Monarch 1.5 years later." Knowing Kuhi's character, Patriarch Yuan Hua snorted coldly and turned his head away. It seemed he did not want to continue arguing about Immortal Kuhi's injury, as he looked down on Immortal Kuhi's character. Reverend Huilin gnashed his teeth and said, "Is Green Staff of Yuan Hua sect a humble and courteous gentleman? To be able to snatch away my senior uncle's dual cultivation partner, ha ha ha, since the beginning of the world, I've never heard of or seen such a thing." Reverend Huilin's words made Daoist Min's eyes turn green with anger. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws, almost wanting to rush forward and fight Reverend Huilin. Meanwhile, Daoist Emolwan and the few Heaven Immortal elders standing next to him were looking at Wuqi with hostility, fixing their bright eyes on Immortal Green Staff. Daoist Chi's eyes went wide as he stuck out his chest and roared in a low, muffled voice, "What are you guys trying to do? Fight." Daoist Min panted a few times, clenching his jaws and suppressing the anger and resentment in his heart. With his eyelids drooping, he waved his hand at Daoist Emolwan and the others. Only then did Daoist Emolwan and the others slowly bow their heads, not saying another word. Immortal Green Staff tilted his eyes and gave Daoist Emolwan and the others a glance, then lowered his voice and said, "Take a good look at those few men. They are Emolwan, Green Pung, Jade Crane and Shrike. They are the 4 disciples of Uncle Master Min, and all their disciples are named after spirit birds. If you see them in the future, you have to stay away from them. By the same logic, if you see any disciple of theirs whose cultivation base is weaker than yours, feel free to bully them. You have Grand Ancestral Master and I, your Ancestral Master, to back you up." Upon hearing Immortal Green Staff's words, Wuqi could not help but twitch his lips. The internal division of Yuan Hua sect was so obvious. Were they not afraid that a conflict between their disciples would cause a rift in the sect? Why would Patriarch Yuan Hua ignore such a matter? Could it be that he had something to pay attention to? In the distance, Patriarch Yuan Hua suddenly roared with laughter and said, "Well done, you old fool Huilin. You are trying to sow discord among our disciples." Sure enough, everyone in Huiling's sect is just a bunch of ordinary people who rely on their 2 lips and 1 tongue to make a living. Hee hee, The reason you came here today is to avenge your disciples. If you had brought your men here, I would have killed all of them. But since you came here alone, I really can't bring myself to attack you alone." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Yuan Hua grinned coldly and said, 1.5 years later, when the outcome of the battle between our disciples is determined, you and I will have a one-on-one fight, using our sect as the wager. What do you think? If I lose, Green Cliff Planet will belong to Huiling Sect. And if you lose, you will have to give Huang Qiao Planet to Yuan Hua Sect as well. Reverend Huilin rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "Yuan Hua, do you really think you can defeat me?" Patriarch Yuan Hua said disapprovingly, "We'll see whether I can defeat you or not when the time comes. Why waste your breath now?" Reverend Huilin rolled his eyes and said with a cold grin, "All right, Immortal Chuan, please be our witness and sign an official document. Using our sect as the wager, I have the same intention as well." A beam of golden light descended from the sky. Clad in a purple robe, Immortal Chuan descended from the sky with a smile on his face, holding a small and exquisite scroll in his hand. He said, "It is the best that both fellow immortals have the same intention. Using our own sect as the wager, such a grand bet is really TSK. Patriarch Yuan Hua was taken aback. Staring at Reverend Huilin, he smiled and said, "So it seems like you are here for a reason, old fart?" Immortal Chuan nodded and said with a smile, "Patriarch Yuan Hua, I've been waiting for you up there for more than half a day. Hee. It is true that Reverend Huilin has asked me to be the witness of the wager in advance." Patriarch Yuan Hua and Reverend Huilin exchanged a glance, then burst out laughing at the same time. However, there was no warmth in their laughter. With Immortal Chuan as the witness, Patriarch Yuan Hua and Reverend Huilin signed the official document at the same time. 1.5 years later, the disciples of both sects would fight to decide the ownership of the planet with the energy stone vein. 1.5 years later, the ancestral masters of both sects would fight to decide the allegiance of both sections. Promoted by some people with ulterior motives, the news of the wager was immediately spread across Puyo Heavenly Realm. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.